My mic, oh, there's my mic, sorry.
You
Okay,
got it now?
all right. I'm going to call this meeting to order, the regular meeting of the Planning Commission, October 17th. I'd like to let the roll reflect that Commissioner Ryan is absent. All other commissioners are here. And with that, I'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, if you'd join me. Okay, our first portion tonight would be oral communications. This would be an opportunity for members of the public to address the commission. They have 3 minutes, and these would be items that are not on the agenda tonight, and the commission is not really able to respond to your comments, but we're certainly here to listen to them. Dina, are there any speaker slips?
We have no oral communications tonight.
Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Our next item is changes to the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
I'd actually like to pull 6B and 6C.
Okay, thank you.
6B, I wouldn't necessarily need a report from staff, but I would have some questions possibly for the applicant if they were present.
Sure.
And 6C, I would just have a disclosure.
Okay. If we could then, I think we don't need a motion for that. I think he can pull them just straight up. But we'll move to the consent calendar, and can I have a motion to approve it absent those 2 items?
A motion to
Move
approve?
to approve?
Okay,
Second that?
see a first and a second. We call the vote. Okay, that motion passes 4-0 for the consent calendar. With that, we will start with item 6B, Atelier Mana Beer and Wine License, case number multi-006963, 2024. Brent, would you like to hear a staff report on this one?
I don't need necessarily a staff report, but if.
I'll open it to you. You're the one that pulled it, so what's your concern, or what would you like to address?
I was just curious, well, I mean, perhaps the staff would know just about if they have had additional seating that's been added since, with this application.
Okay, if we could ask for clarification on that?
Could you repeat your question?
Has there been any additional seating with this application at the location?
Not that I am aware of. The seating count that was provided from the applicant is 28 seats.
And
If you-
I was just curious to know if there was going to be any additional changes to the business hours?
To my understanding, the business hours will stay as usual. However, they are requesting alcohol service to be from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. for the occasional special events.
Okay. Do we need to go through the whole public comment then? Since this is open?
We do not. The sole question would be, does any member of the public wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, then you can certainly consider a motion.
Okay.
So I was only just curious as to whether it was going to expand, the use of the location, the business use of the location. I think that was some of the public comment that had come in, and that drew my attention.
Okay. Are you comfortable with what you've heard tonight?
I am.
Okay. Could I entertain a motion then?
I would motion to approve.
Okay.
I move to approve the project.
Okay. Call the vote.
That's just for 6B, right?
Just for 6B. Okay, that motion passes 4-0. Moving on to item 6C, the Sayer residence, case number multi-005446, 2022. Again, I'd like to see, well, I don't necessarily need a staff report, but I did have questions about this too. You've pulled it. Do you
I
want
have a disclosure.
Okay.
So
if you-
I can see this location from my residence. And so although I'm not within the 500 or 1,000-foot radius, I believe I can give, a fair judgment of the application,
Okay.
of the applicant. And I would like to participate in any discussions that we have regarding it. But if it's, recommended that I recuse, then so I accept that.
Okay, I don't think I see an issue with that. We're not really assessing view ordinance type of things.
I'm looking at you, Scott.
Yeah, certainly, it's not a conflict.
Okay. I do have a question of staff. I don't think I need a full staff report, but, and it may be an applicant question, I'm not sure, but I'm concerned about the height of the roof, the mechanical deck, the flat roof at the top, and how tall is the parapet or the roof lines that surround that mechanical equipment?
Hello, my name is Christina Bustamante. I'm a senior planner. I was assigned to this particular project. So to answer your question, staff had gone back and forth with the applicant team and our staff to work out that detail. And so it's complying with our height requirement. I do have an exhibit within a PowerPoint if you'd like to take a look at that. But otherwise, it does comply with standards.
Okay, if we could see that exhibit, please.
Sure, give me a moment. So the portion of the slide that you have before you, you are looking at one of the elevations, and this one's the east elevation. So this is going to face the public street side on 5th, and they are showing the mechanical roof part, so the flat part, if you will, in this dotted red line, and so that's where they're saying flat roof beyond. For us, any flat roof elements has to be 22 feet or lower. The mechanical flat roof, they're showing at 20 feet, so that complies. And then there's a couple other nuances, but I think that was the piece that you asked about. So
It is. I'm concerned about what the height of the ridge is then. Is it the distance between the ridge and that mechanical deck or roof is 2 feet? 3
So
feet?
this one was a little bit interesting because there's a bit of movement happening with the roof, and because of this mechanical area, if you will, it doesn't have a traditional ridge that runs across. And so this highlighted green area is what we could perceive as a ridge if it were to be there. And so for us, that's how we would say, here is the height envelope that you have, and the structure is within that, and so it complies.
Yeah. My concern is less about what the height of the building is does it screen the mechanical equipment that is going to be put on top of the roof?
Yes, that's the intent.
Okay. And to accomplish that, they've provided a 24-inch height or a,
Say that again? Sorry.
what could you tell me what the difference in height is between the deck and the top of that ridge, the actual ridge, not the imaginary extended ridge?
I see. Okay. Well, if we were to look across and see kind of where this blue line is, that's a 22 and a half. So it's roughly 2 feet between the flat part and the ridge of that mechanical roof, if you will.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. Bob, did you have any questions? Okay. Is the applicant here, and would they like to, were there any other questions from the commission? Okay. Is the applicant here, and would they like to address the commission? You have an opportunity to address the commission if you want. Okay. Are there any public comments?
We do. We have one speaker, and that's Charlene Bonney with a time donation from Frederick Mensling, if I said that right. Would Charlene like to go up? And Frederick's right next to her.
Thank you.
Uh-oh.
Thing I was sent in the mail was that the Sayer project, they're going to appeal what you decided last time at the first meeting. They were going to appeal the things that we were so opposed to. And you weren't going to change or give them a variance. Now it's the roof issue?
The roof issue is not a variance, but
It's not a variance?
no.
Is that all we're talking about tonight, or are we going to appeal? Are you guys, no, it was hard for me to
Yeah,
understand.
that was all I was talking about tonight. If you have other issues, you're welcome to alert us to your concerns.
The issue is the parking.
The parking.
They want to cut down their driveway on their original plan, and last time at the last meeting, you wouldn't give them a variance to do that. They had to get a variance to shorten the driveway.
They're not requesting a variance tonight, so they've redesigned to comply with the setback.
So they're going to have a 20-foot driveway?
Correct. If I presume that is the setback of the front.
Everybody else on that side of the street?
Right, whatever the setback is for the front yard.
Okay. That sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, happy. And then there was another thing. That was it. The parking really is a real problem there.
Okay. Thank you for coming tonight.
Excuse me, I think their front yard setback requirement, the development standard is 20 feet, but they are giving 16 feet 4 inches, and it's because it's a existing non-conforming condition. So it isn't that they would need a variance because it's non-conforming and the city allows them to maintain non-conformity. So she might not have understood that.
Just to clarify my comment to you, they do not have a 20-foot setback, but they are in compliance with the front yard setback requirement.
Oh, they are, with the 20-foot.
They have 16 foot 4 inches.
If I may add some information to help address
Please.
the public comment. So on the screen here, I'm sharing with you just the colored site plan, if you will. And I'm going to zoom in here just so it's easier to see. So the driveway concern that the public comment brought up is, it is a 20-foot driveway. Yes, Commissioner, you're correct in that the existing non-conforming setback to this portion of the structure is remaining at 16.4. But I think the crux of the comment was the parking, and yes, there's going to be parking available on the driveway as well as within the garage.
Thank you. Okay. No other comments?
We do have one more
Oh,
speaker.
one more speaker?
And that would be Cade Entz.
Hello. My dad and I purchased the home on the north side of this residence just about 20 years ago. We love coming here and experiencing the views that we enjoy from that home. When I read through all of the items for this, which is a lot, it can become very confusing. One of my main concerns is also parking. When I read through here, I also noticed that the normal city setback is 20 feet and that they are asking for 16 foot 4 inches. And the wording was that that would be allowed if the property was torn down, whether that be by accident or on purpose, and that it could be rebuilt at that if it did not increase the density or intensity. I'm not an expert on what density and intensity means, but when you look at the view of this property from our property, from the north side view, by them pushing the home, leaving the front setback where it is, but then doubling the height going straight up, because right now it has a pitched roof. So by going straight up as they would like to do, it completely eliminates our view of all of the volleyball courts, the playground, the sand area where events are held beyond the volleyball courts, the fire pits. We can't see any of that anymore from both our casita kitchen and family room and our main kitchen. And to me, that means it's greatly increasing the density and intensity from my perspective. So I'd like the council to consider that. It is indeed increasing the density and intensity. If it were to keep that front setback with the same roof pitch, then it would not be changing the density or intensity. But that's not the plan here. In addition to that, with the parking, there's a reason that the city wants 20 feet, and that's because that's what you need to fit a normal car. My minivan that I drove here 7 hours today to be at this meeting with my family is a little over 17 feet. It's just a normal Honda Odyssey. So if I were to try to park on that driveway and I pulled up until my front bumper was touching the garage door, I would still be hanging out in the street. I think that having 2 garage spaces and a little less than 2 driveway spaces in that very congested street for a home that's over 7,000 square feet is not sufficient. So I'd like the commission to reconsider the importance of that setback. And I don't know for sure what my rights are as far as the view goes, but I would sure like to be able to continue to enjoy the view that we have for almost 20 years.
Okay, thank you for your comments. No other, would the applicant like to respond?
So I'll just touch on a couple quick things, but just to make it clear, the parking side has 20 feet. We've done that. We've listened to all the neighbors to help that out. Moreover, the Sayers are giving up their curb cut, they're giving a sidewalk, and they're now creating more parking for the street itself. Also in favor of supporting and helping what we've talked about. So we did not ask for another variance. The one north side is in the 16.4 non-conforming. We've been over that. We've been done nothing but give and give on view, and we could still be up higher, and they've chosen to remove that. So we're doing everything to help out.
Thank you. So an increase in density is referring to an increase in the use. That would be, for example, going from 1 unit to 2 units. There's not any increase in the density. Increase in intensity refers to an increase in the nonconformity. The nonconformity itself is not being increased. We're staying to the extent, and maybe Christina could put up the side view, but the portion of the structure that extends into the setback is within the envelope of the existing structure. And there are no view rights of neighbors. There's no view easement here. There's no view ordinance. And I'd also like to point out, I'm sure you know Commissioner Whitaker because you live in the area, and anyone else who has visited that area. There's a very steep slope on 5th Street, and the neighbor's house is probably 50 feet above this house. I don't see how this project, even if it were taller than what we're proposing, could block any views. Thank you.
I'll put just one more thing. That front that's in the 16.4, you can see the height, and then you can see how it steps back to the 20 foot. So if we're technically speaking, we're still following that non-conforming portion in architecture.
Okay, thank you, guys.
I'm sorry about that.
Thank you. Any questions for us?
Any questions?
Yes.
How high is the wall on the north side of the project? I'm looking at the Exhibit 4 of the staff report that shows the.
Oops, sorry, switch the slide here.
It's where the gate is. on, I'm not sure, I'm assuming that's the north side of the house. I'm looking at a front view on the staff report, 3D view.
Okay, that's the north side elevation where the neighbor that spoke would have been looking at. And then this is the east elevation, so the front yard. So is it, Commissioner, is this the
Yes,
elevation?
that's
Yeah.
right.
Okay, and the wall here is what we would be looking at on the screen as the right-hand side? Is that what you're looking at?
Yes.
Okay, so that, from what I understand, is an existing wall and will remain as is.
Is that a height, a non-conforming height, but it's existing, so they don't have to? It just looks, from the staff report, Exhibit 4, it looks like it's twice the size of the gate.
Yeah, so if I were to look at this and just kind of pull a dimension off the plans really quickly, on the left-hand side of the screen from the first floor to the second floor, there's a 10-foot dimension there. So like if I were to just kind of eyeball it and use that as a dimension to measure what that height of that wall is, it's similar. It's about 10 feet. So it's a little over 6, but again, it's existing and it's been there and it's going to remain in place.
So the height limit is 6, it's 10, it's non-conforming, but it's not changing, so they have the right to keep it at 10.
Correct.
Okay. It just looked large, and I thought the height limit was 6, so, okay.
Any further questions of the applicant? Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'd like to close the public comment portion of this and open up to commissioner deliberation. I don't have a concern with the 16-foot setback. It's a non-conforming structure, and it's lower than the current building roof line. The parking is not a concern of mine. They have a standard 20-foot depth driveway and a garage, so I don't see an issue. My only concern initially was the whether the mechanical equipment would be screened at the top, and they have about a 2-foot screen around that. It goes a little taller at some of the gables and stuff like that. So that was my only initial concern. I think I'm satisfied with that, but I'd be open to discussion.
I agree. And I think that Encinitas has code deficiency with regard to this type of project. It does not increase density. It does not increase intensity. But it's a completely new project. And I think many jurisdictions would address that. So just for the record, for council to hear me say that, I think our code needs to be examined and perhaps modified.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay. My concern over the screening doesn't rise to the level that I think I would deny a project for that. So with that, I would make a motion to approve the project.
Second.
Okay, call the vote. Okay, that motion passes 4-0. The project is approved. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to item 8A, the Bella Vista Residential Subdivision. Case number multi-005-107, 2022. And planning staff is Jay DeChoso. But first, I'm sorry to interrupt. Are there any disclosures regarding this project?
No.
Oh, I've definitely been past the site.
Same.
Okay, and I've visited the site, but have not talked to anybody about it.
Agreed.
Okay.
Same.
All right. Take it away, Jay.
Okay. Good evening, Chairman, members of the Commission. My name is J.D. Shoso. This presentation regards the Bella Vista Density Bonus Subdivision. Whoops. Project site is located off of Bella Vista Drive in Leucadia. Project site is a coastal mesa that rises slightly from Bella Vista Drive towards the center of the mesa. Generally, the disturbed portion of the area is shown as the flat area in the aerial, and then drops into a natural steep canyon slope into the eastern third of the property that overlooks La Costa Avenue and Barraquitas Lagoon. Elevation point is about 380 feet above sea level. Property is on rural residential 1, which allows for 1 dwelling unit per acre with a minimum lot size of 1 acre. Site is surrounded with single-family residential subdivisions that were constructed in the last 20 years. Proposed application for the proposed subdivision includes a density bonus, tentative map design review permit, and coastal development permit. Density bonus allows for the construction of for the subdivision of the single lot into 17 lots with 2 affordable lots, 15 market rate, and as part of the city's sixth housing element approval, state housing and community development requires Encinitas to use gross acreage as required by the state density bonus law. And this gross acreage was also affirmed in additional correspondence in the months preceding the approval of the sixth housing element cycle. The project also includes a design review permit to address grading that exceeds 4 feet of fill and 8 feet of cut for the subdivision. And the project includes a coastal development permit to demonstrate project compliance with the local coastal program. Project was reviewed according to the requirements of the RR1 zone and the associated overlays, hillside and bluff, cultural natural resources, coastal overlay zones, and includes also the objective design standards and guidelines and the city's public road standards. Other review of other documents include the County of San Diego Consolidated Fire Code and state density bonus law as stated. The proposed project is a 17-unit subdivision, 17-lot subdivision. The western 2/3 of the lot is depicted in green. Yellow is the open space buffer and fire management zone where those intersect, where future construction would be strictly limited. And the red is the existing steep slopes and sensitive habitats that fall to La Costa Avenue and would be preserved as part of the project in an open space easement in perpetuity. Project also includes, as stated, 15 market rate lots and 2 very low affordable lots, which show the homes in purple, 1 private road, 2 stormwater basins shown in the 2 leaves, and the installation of associated landscape, utilities, stormwater drainage, site improvements, and a temporary construction trailer. Of the 2 very low-income lots, 1 is preserved in perpetuity, and the other is preserved for very low-income families for the next 55 years. And conditions of approval are in place to ensure that they are compliant with all affordable housing requirements outlined with state law and the city's code. To construct a density bonus project, waivers and incentive concessions are available to the applicant. State density bonus law requires local agencies to grant waiver requests unless one or more of the above findings can be made to deny any waiver of development standards. Findings to be made are, without the waiver, the standard physically precludes the project. Waiver has a specific adverse impact on public health, safety, or the physical environment. Waiver has an adverse impact on any real property registered with the state's Registry of Historical Resources, and the waiver is contrary to state or federal law. The first waiver regards the private road. The Muni Code states that private streets may only be established when serving 10 or less lots ending in a cul-de-sac. Project proposes 17 lots, therefore a private road waiver is requested to reduce the width, pavement width, and cul-de-sac width to allow 17 lots, which is greater than the 10 required by the code. The waiver specifically is to not apply the public road standard to construct the road. City's fire code allows a minimum 24-foot width and 36-foot cul-de-sac radius. Applicant has provided 25-foot wide road with a 5-foot wide ped easement on both sides and public parking easements outside of the private travelway and a 36-foot cul-de-sac radius. And the narrower private road allows for the greater amount of area, what would be a portion of the lot to be used as developable area for the subdivision, and achieves the 17 lots as afforded by state density bonus law. The next waivers regard net lot area, lot width, and lot depth. Because of the proposed lot area waiver to yield the 17 lots that are proposed and allowed, the reduced lot area poses application of the 1 acre minimum lot would pose a physical constraint to the 17 lots proposed. Lots 8, 9, and 10 comply because they also include the open space and are the largest. All remaining lots average about 19,000 square feet. All the lots require a waiver for width, except for Lot 10, and all lots require a waiver for depth, except for the largest lots, 8 through 10, and 13 through 17, which are the deepest lots along the south side of the property. The lot sizes and lot dimensions have to be reduced to develop the subdivision at the density allowed by state law. There are setback waivers, side yard setback and front yard setback are requested. All side yard setbacks are requesting a reduction from the required 15 to 10, and a front yard setback to be reduced from 30 to 25. The first 8 lots comply with 25 feet. The code allows for half the lots to be reduced to allow for varying front yard setbacks. The remainder of 9 through 17 requests the actual waiver for the front yard setback reduction from 30 to 25 feet. There is no rear yard setback waiver. All lots comply. And again, the reduction in the setback creates a viable building envelope on the lots that are smaller than the minimum lot size under zoning. Grading. Grading on the site has been designed to match the existing landforms to accommodate building pads for the proposed lots, utilities, landscaping, drainage to the stormwater basins, and the private access road. No grading is proposed in the open space. Design review consideration for grading is required for the proposed fill, which exceeds 4 feet in height, depicted on green, which is on the eastern portions of Lot 4 through 8 and 10 through 13, and the proposed cut, which is blue, in the lower southwest corner of eastern portion of Lot 16, where there is a slope depicted in blue. And lastly, design review also considers encroachment into steep slopes. Although the majority of the steep slopes are located in the area to be preserved in an open space, as depicted in red, the clouded areas depict some of the smaller non-contiguous steep slope areas that have a slope greater than 25% that are to be encroached upon in order to create the subdivision. These areas sum to a total of 3%, which is significantly less than the maximum 10% allowed by the Muni Code. No other steep slope encroachment is proposed. Because these areas are small and scattered and not contiguous, they are difficult to protect in consideration of the larger open space to be protected. The balance of everything else may be exempt to grade the subdivision and minimize further encroachments to the greatest extent feasible, which contains in order to create the subdivision. Landscape plan. Pervious pavers are part of the pedestrian path along both sides of the street and around the cul-de-sac, including the 17 public parking spaces depicted with a P. Retaining walls are a neutral tan color and softened with landscape plantings and climbing vines. A 6-foot tall firewall, to be further discussed later, is located along the rear yards of lots 6 through 10, depicted in the thick red line, separating the subdivision from the open space. Landscaping consists of drought-tolerant and native Southern California landscape with a mixture of trees, shrubs, and ground cover that is proposed and along the internal private way and within the stormwater basins. 21 trees are proposed, western redbud and African sumac, to also be planted along the Bella Vista Drive and the private road. Future HOA will maintain these landscape areas and the stormwater basins. The future homeowner of each residential lot will maintain all landscaping within their private yards outside of these HOA areas. A fire protection plan was prepared because the project site is located in a very high fire hazard severity zone, as demonstrated by the State Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. The Bella Vista project will be constructed under the strictest fire protection standards, including enhanced fire-resistant building materials, improved landscape requirements, and non-combustible exterior elements. To meet the Encinitas Fire Department's emergency access requirements, no parking would be allowed within the 25-foot wide private street. The street will either be signed or painted red. Red curbed, fire lane, no parking. And hydrants are located next to Lot 17 along Bella Vista Drive, next to Lot 15, which is midway up the block, and next to Lot 12 in the cul-de-sac. And then there are adjacent fire hydrants off-site that are within the vicinity. The M&D analysis prepared showed that the sensitive habitats and plant species are predominantly on site in the eastern area to be preserved in an open space easement. The surrounding area is fully developed. The proposed open space would officially connect it to the recorded open space easements that were approved with the adjacent subdivisions. That rectangle in the center is the subdivision that does not have a recorded officially open space easement that is protected. As a result, there are 2 mitigation measures to be added. The first requires that if grading is proposed during the bird raptor breeding season, then a pre-construction survey is required. And if an active nest is identified, then the grading shall be postponed. And then the second is that there would be fencing to be installed during construction along the limit of the open space. Tribal cultural resources were also addressed. The M&D analysis showed that there are no historical resources on site. The property has never been developed with structures, but has been active in agriculture. Project includes mitigation measures to have a paleontologist, archaeologist, and Native American monitor observe grading and follow procedures for any found resources to be protected. Tribal resources could be reburied in accordance to the tribe's traditions and or given to the next descendant, and other resources would be cataloged and given to the San Diego Natural History Museum, for example. As far as transportation and traffic, the project would generate 170 average daily trips. Traffic counts were taken in December of 2021 when all schools were in session. Several roadway segments and intersections were evaluated with and without the project, and the project is consistent with the Encinitas general plan since it operates at level of service C or better. And the project also was evaluated for vehicle miles traffic, which would not be cumulatively considerable, and its cumulative impacts would be less than significant, since its 170 average daily trips is less than the maximum threshold of 1,000 ADT in accordance with ITE. The project is conditioned to pay traffic mitigation fees based on the net increase of trips generated to the site. A citizen participation program meeting was held on March 11. 25 people signed in, but 30 attended, held at the project site. All property owners and tenants were notified within 500 feet of the project. All concerns are listed in the staff report, in the final CPP report, and other public correspondence. Additional public comments received outside of the CPP are included as attachment PC6, and a public notice was mailed on September 5, and other public comments that were received in the days leading up to the meeting were provided to you today by memo. A mitigated negative declaration was prepared as for CEQA review. The MND addresses all the issue areas identified per CEQA. There were no impacts to be found to be significant that can't be mitigated. Because mitigation measures can be reduced or be avoided to a level below significance, the MND can be approved. Therefore, staff recommends the Planning Commission to adopt the resolution of approval, approving the project, subject conditions and mitigation measures, including the memos provided to the Planning Commission earlier today for your consideration. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Are there any questions of staff?
Yeah, I've got a couple clarifications. Okay. Could you pull up the biology report? And just let me get my computer on. Page 4 of the PDF on the biology report. I'm almost there. Bear with me. Timed out. Let's see. Talks about the timing of their visit and that they didn't visit while there was a, I'm almost there, sorry. Let's see, Bella Vista, let's see, not staff report. Sorry, there's a lot of documents, as you guys all know. Okay. In the middle of the paragraph, it reads, limitations to the completion of the comprehensive floral and faunal checklist were few and only limited to the natural constraints of the season summer. While field surveys were conducted in the summer and likely too late for detection of a number of rare plant and wildlife species if present. Can you comment on your thoughts on a biological report that was too late for the detection of rare plant and wildlife species?
Sure. The biologist is here. I'd like to defer to the biologist. Thank you.
I guess that's probably not staff clarification, that's the applicant, right? So I should not ask staff that
That's
question?
fine.
Okay, I just wasn't sure. All right, so that was one, and then the biologist can talk to page 6, where it reads, limitations to the complication of a comprehensive floral and faunal checklist were few within the survey area, most of which have been previously legally graded, cleared, and developed. The general quality of the graded land and urbanized habitat within the survey area is expected of low quality. While the field visit was conducted in the winter, it was likely too early for the detection of a number of rare plant and wildlife species, particularly after the ongoing drought. So I'm concerned, and I'd like to hear what the biologist has to say. How can you complete a report where you weren't checking for plants and you weren't checking for fauna? This was also discussed in an email that came in from a law firm late this afternoon regarding, so they referenced the same things. So I'll start there.
Thank you. Mike Jefferson, I'm the biologist. So the surveys, you do a general initial survey to determine what the potential is. The footprint of this entire project is within the maintained agricultural portion. Because there is no potential for rare plants to potentially persist within maintained agricultural area, you don't have to go do a spring survey. Because there was the coastal sage and chaparral on the eastern edge, we went and had to go do protocol gnatcatcher surveys. That's done for over 6 weeks over the spring and summer. So we have 6 weeks of additional surveys over the entire area where no additional sensitive species were observed. So there's a difference between the general report that triggers additional surveys. So because the footprint is outside of the habitat, there's no potential for those species, especially since it's maintained, so that additional plant and animal survey in the impact footprint in the farm area is not required. And we did survey it, and the plant that they're looking for, the one plant is a perennial plant, so that means that it's always present. It's not.
I understand the ag area was disturbed, and walking it or looking at it today, I get it.
Yeah.
But your survey of the area, how can you make a comment that the development won't impact the area? And we're talking about the slopes and the sensitive areas. So did you find any flora or fauna in the slope area? Did you go to the slope area?
Absolutely.
And are you making the statement that the development would have no impact on those areas where?
Both are true. So the survey is over the entire property,
Okay.
including the slope. And there was a rare plant observed on the slope. That's the wart stem ceanothus. And it is fully protected with a buffer. And so and wart stem ceanothus, it's a perennial, so it's always there, you see it. So we did see all of the things that are there, but factually in the farmed area, it's annually maintained to disturb the soil and to kill all the plants so there's no fire issue. And the disturbance of the soil really is the key for why you don't expect to find these rare plants in farmed areas, because the soil integrity is the key. And they usually are tucked underneath other shrubs, or maybe there's like a microtopography but on a farm area where it's just ripped into lines, there's no hydrology, the soils are destroyed. That's why we don't have to go back and do the more serious survey for that area. And if they were impacting the slope,
Right.
we would definitely have had to go do
But
all of
but
these.
my understanding,
They're
they
not.
did find the plant in the slope area. You found the plant in the slope area, and you're saying that the development of the houses, because there's a buffer, will not impact those plants.
Precisely. Yes. They're outside of the grading or fuel modification zone, so they're protected in perpetuity.
And So that one was the one particular Ceanothus. What,
That's the one that we observed.
Right.
There were other ones that they're wondering about, but that's, my point is, the area was surveyed, and it
Right.
was surveyed 6 times in the spring and summer, and there is no expectation of those plants to be in an agricultural area because of soil's been nuked, there's no hydrology, and usually they like to have cover of other shrubs, and they tuck underneath them or things like that.
And what about that, under that same analysis, the fauna, the birds, you know, are
Yeah, it's-
any of the
there's
birds?
no-
Go
There's
ahead.
no habitat or cover, so there's not even places for the birds to stand. But birds are high mobility species, and high. But
Please,
Hang on,
please
hang
keep
on.
your tongue.
Thank you.
This is not your turn.
I'm not so much where, I understand that the flat area, the disturbed agricultural area. So now the same questions I'm asking are about, is there, did you observe any fauna in the slope area? And if you did, would those be impacted by the development? Or is the buffer zone, is it the same for the plants at the buffer zone? I know they're mobile, but can you just address the same question, but applied
Definitely.
to fauna?
So for fauna, there are urban species on that slope. There were no rare species observed, even though we went out 6 times specifically looking for the rare and sensitive.
But your report said you didn't go out at the times that they're normally there.
No, see, that's
Okay.
the general.
Okay.
And then the general, you say, oh, let's say this project was impacting the coastal sage. So the general one just said, okay, we need to go do gnatcatcher surveys and the rare plant surveys because we're physically impacting the dirt where the sensitive habitat is.
Right.
Because this project is not impacting the dirt where the sensitive habitat is, that's just not where they occur. And so that's why we put them in the open space. And the mitigation will also put in a silt fence. So those are designed to stop water, and basically it stops the reptiles. Mammals and the birds can move around, but the reptiles, they can get stuck. So what it does is it creates a boundary between the open space and the project footprint. Really on this one, there's no need for the animals to be running around. Sometimes we clear good habitat, right? And that's when they run out. This is not the case here. The habitat is all behind the project. So we'll isolate the slope with all the habitat, and then you're be grading in the front. So there isn't really an expectation of animals running up the slope into the area. And if they did, that's why you have the silt fence there to stop their actual, they can't run in. And you'll have the monitors there as well.
Okay.
So
There was one more thing on the biology report. 4.3.1.2.1. Again, sorry, keeps timing out. I was trying to be more efficient this time. I wrote it all down on my thing so I wouldn't have to do it this way. All right. Okay, let me just scroll down to your report. It was 4.3.2.1 was the reference on page 17. So it just took a while. You probably have this memorized. Okay. The header is sensitive plants observed. And this is, I guess we're talking about the wart stem ceanothus. Was observed within the CSS on-site at the time of the surveys. Wart stem ceanothus, that's a CNPS, rare plant rank, rare threatened. So I guess back to rhetorical question, it's your position that the development will not disturb the rare plant that was observed?
it definitely will not.
Okay.
Yeah, and these are perennial shrubs. They're not just like a wispy, small annual that can just pop up.
Right.
And like I was saying, with the maintenance that they've done, the seed bank in the farmed area, there's just nothing there, and there's nothing adjacent to pull it in, so.
Those are my questions by the biologist.
Thank you very much.
Anything else?
I do have one question for Jay. The BMPs will be maintained by the HOA, the Homeowners Association, and the, who's going to maintain the street? Is that it's being built as a private street now. Will it ever be deeded over or added to the city's street inventory?
It's a private street. It doesn't meet the city standards, therefore it will be HOA.
Okay. And no gate is being requested as part of this?
No gate.
Okay. Any other questions of staff?
On the staff report, page 3, 1.12. Can you just walk through the net versus gross? I think there's different calculations in the document, the staff report, and in my conversations with staff, different calculations are used for different purposes. So the first purpose would be for the net versus gross. This has come up on just about every housing density project, and it's always helpful to me to understand the calculation here. And maybe it's in the report, and maybe you can bring it up just so people can see it. I think there was a little chart. But in the case of how do we get to go from the 10.23 acres to the calculation for the 17 units?
Yeah, give me a second. The density bonus report shows 2 of the areas you're talking about. Give me a second here. In general, so there's the entire site owned by the property owner is 10.11 acres. That 10.11 acreage is used for the purposes of state density bonus law.
Okay.
The code also does specify other areas and how to calculate them for other purposes. We also have a definition of net lot area, which is typically used for lot coverage, which is gross less the public roads or easements, if you will. So in this case, it would be 10.11 minus the 30-foot wide road dedication. I don't recall right now how long it is, along Bella Vista, that would be incorporated as part of the final map because that portion is old county road utility. That subtracted, that ends up being 9.88. And then we also have the slope-adjusted net acreage for the purposes of density. So then that is gross acreage minus the public road, minus the private street, subtraction of certain steep slopes, gradients, and that ends up being 6 point something and change.
And they're the 6.25?
Yes.
So then with that calculate, and this goes to a letter that we received from an applicant or from a constituent, and they talked about gross versus net. So part of this is a rhetorical question answering directly to a letter that we received at 4:30 or something like that. So then when you get down to the 6.25 on this page, that's where we start working with how much square footage the project, in terms of each of the houses added all up, they can do in terms of density, in terms of the envelope of each of the square footage of each of the houses?
If they were, I'm not completely understanding your question because I was about to, well, go ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Well, I was about to say, state density bonus law, since you're doing a density bonus map, state law, the state requires us to use the gross acreage. If they were doing a regular map, if you will, then they would be using the 6 acres, the slope adjusted net acreage.
Okay, so they're using the 10.11 on the page, and when I'm talking about density, I'm using that total square footage add up the square footage for each of the houses.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And is there a different calculation to say you can build 100,000 square feet here, or you can build 10,000 square feet here total? What calculation is used?
I'm not entirely.
I think, are you talking FAR? Floor
Yeah,
area ratio?
I guess I am.
Lot
If I
coverage?
may, I believe what you're getting at is the net lot area, and that's the size of the lot that they have created. You start with what the underlying zone requires, And then
Right.
density bonus allows you to reduce that size.
Not so much the lot size. I get that, and because there's various lot sizes here, and there's a chart for that. But I'm talking about, I guess, Commissioner Dalton mentioned FAR. So where is the FAR? And I think of that in my world as density.
But it's not.
It's not.
But it would also be based on the individual lot that house is going on, if I'm.
Correct.
Right?
So
Lot 17, if it's whatever size
so
lot 17 is, that's what
it
they'll
comes down
measure.
to the lot size, not overall the entire. Add up all 17 lots and you get X square feet, and how you allocate it is up to you. They're saying it's per lot. Got it.
Correct.
Thank you.
Are we covered?
I'll probably get to the rest of these during the meeting. So yeah, I think
Okay,
so.
good, thank you. Is the applicant here, and would they like to make a presentation?
Jay's pulling up the presentation. Make sure I know how to use this thing. Okay. Good evening. My name is Erin McKinley. I am the applicant. I'm representing them this evening. I know that lately you've had a lot of complex and high-density projects in front of you guys recently. But tonight, I'm going to present something different. The Bella Vista project is a simple tentative map for large estate lots. It requires no rezone, no general plan amendment. It has zero impacts to habitat. And in fact, it protects over 32% of the property as biological open space, and it's not high density. Let's start with the baseline facts. The property is 10.11 gross acres as confirmed by a survey. The property is zoned rural residential 1, which allows 1 unit to the acre. The project conforms to California State Density Bonus, which does not require a rezone, nor does it require a general plan amendment. The state law specifically calculates on gross acreage, and with the recent passing of AB 1278, this isn't working, there we go, known informally as stacked density bonus, this project's gross acreage could now calculate up to a potential of 23 lots. However, this project proposes 17. This is a privately owned property, it's not public land, and the owner has been regularly maintaining and weeding the site for fire abatement. Early on in the process, it was important for us to get direction on our CEQA document. I've seen a lot of communication from neighbors on this topic, so we're going to spend a moment reviewing why a mitigated neg deck was used on this project property. On the screen is information from the Association of Environmental Professionals, and it gives a broad stroke understanding as to why these different types of CEQA documents are used. As you can see, a majority of the projects fall under exemption status, roughly 42%. Basically, those projects follow the underlying zoning general plan and have no significant impacts and are under less than 5 acres in size. Our project meets some of these criteria, but our project is 10.11 acres, so it could not be considered infill exemption. The next category is the MND, and beyond that is the EIR, which is encumbered on only roughly 6% of projects in California. EIRs are reserved for projects that have potentially great and significant environmental impact, and historically, the average project size to use an EIR in California has been around 426 units. Our project has no significant unmitigatable impacts. It is also important the community understand that the city of Encinitas who determines the proper CEQA document, and that it's the city who contracts directly with the CEQA preparer, not the developer. As a review, the project is 17 large estate lots. It cannot be considered infill because it's greater than 5 acres, and the project is fully consistent with the approved general plan and fully compliant with California State Density Bonus. The project fully avoids impacts to habitat, and it protects habitats with a biological easement. The project also provides for 2 much-needed affordable housing lots. Understanding all of this, the city determined the project's CEQA document to be an MND, and that MND is a comprehensive document that includes, but is not limited to, studies such as biology, traffic, archaeocultural, as well as a fire protection plan. And over the last 1.5 years, the project has been thoroughly studied, so nothing about our CEQA document has cut any corners. Now that we've defined the property and we understand we're in compliance with the general plan and zoning and state density bonus, and we've identified the necessary CEQA document, it's at this point that we engage the community. I think I have the date wrong up there. Community outreach was held on site in March of 23, not February. My apologies. Approximately 25 people came to that March outreach meeting, and a site plan was shared, and questions on density bonus law were answered at that meeting. We collected feedback and made sure to fully study each issue. Above is a list of the feedback expressed in the corresponding documents that studied the concerns to ensure that no significant impacts were made in those areas. We understand that this property is going from a long-time vacant field where people have imbued themselves with the type of ownership over its use. And we understand that there's nostalgia attached to the idea of it always remaining vacant. But the reality is that this is a privately owned property intended to be residential by the zoning, and the development is following a legally established pathway, and we're putting forth a project that's compatible with the neighborhood. We absolutely owe the neighborhood a very thorough study of the issues that they brought up. And over the course of the last 18 months, we have fully investigated and studied all of them. All of those studies are available to the public. We may not be in lockstep with the diverse array of expressed wants, but the project is in full compliance and it has been thoughtfully designed. So what is this project? This is actually one of the more straightforward projects that I've had the pleasure of working on. This is 17 estate-sized lots, which are proposed to be situated on a portion of the parcel which is already disturbed land, and that is regularly maintained. These lots are plotted on approximately 6.8 acres of the overall 10.11 acre site. The project has been erroneously referred to as maximum high density. However, that's simply not the case. Based on overall acreage, the project is plotted at 1.68 units to the acre, and if we deduct the 3.31 acre dedicated open space, it's plotted at about 2.5 units to the acre. That's actually lower density than is permitted by the R3 zone, which is the zoning across the street on the Lagoon View Homeowners Association properties. With regards to community compatibility, we did a study of lot size of the surrounding quarter-mile radius of the site to provide a fair and honest look at the directly adjacent neighborhood. There were 112 homes represented by 4 homeowners associations within this radius. As you can see in the table above, if we were to look at the median lot size of the Bella Vista lots are larger than the surrounding community. And if we were to look at the average lot size of Bella Vista lots, they are directly comparable at over 24,000 square feet. The neighborhood has voiced frustration that we're not proposing 1 acre lots, and that's absolutely fair and true. However, we are providing a very generously sized estate lots that fit organically within the surrounding existing developments. In addition to having compatible lot size with the neighborhood, we also took great care to plan a map that fosters an attractive street stream. 3 lots will front on Bella Vista, but no driveways. All the lots will take access off the project's meandering internal street. A generous 25-foot sloped landscape buffer also cushions the future homes back off Bella Vista. We also received additional communication regarding questions on biology, fire, and buffers. 32.7% of the property is set aside for protected open space. What's shown in red is a no-touch zone. No grading, no weeding, no building. It is strictly protected open space. The remainder of the property has been regularly maintained over time and did not contain any sensitive biology or vegetation. This project does not touch any sensitive habitat. In fact, it puts an open space easement in place to protect it. This protected biological area does not overlap with any fire mitigation buffers. The yellow represents a limited building zone where no combustible structures are allowed and where fire clearing takes place. As part of our MND, a fire protection plan was prepared. To ensure this topic was fully vetted, we elected to take the additional step to have that FPP peer-reviewed by another fire professional, so that not just 1, but 2 fire professionals can speak to the thoroughness of the report. The development of this project actually helps to reduce fire hazards for the community because of the buffers and walls it establishes, and the maintenance of those buffers, as well as the enhanced fire-fortified construction methodologies used on the homes as required by the FPP, inclusive of fire sprinklers. The last thing that we should touch base on are the affordable lots. This project provides 2 much-needed affordable lots, which will be deed restricted for very low affordable homes. The project before you is a 17-lot map, of which 2 lots are affordable. The project adheres to the general plan and zone and is compliant with density bonus law. The project has 0 impacts to habitat and protects over 32% of it as biological open space. The proposed lots average over 24,000 square feet and complement the existing already developed lots in proximity to the site. This is not high-density housing. This is a well-considered, appropriately sized project for a property that's always intended to be residential. Please consider supporting approval of the Bella Vista project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions of the applicant?
On the site map, you show two of the affordable lots. One Jay pulled up earlier had purple on it. And I believe it's lot 2 and lot 7. Is that right?
Yes.
Those are 60% less on average than on the smallest other lot. I think it came out to like 59.7%. Those are pretty small lots.
60,
The 80,
bigger than
the
my lot at
8,000.
home.
I think the next best lot was 11,000 square feet, and these are like 8,000 square feet. So it's quite clear that the affordable houses, based on the lot plan that you have, and I know we're not going to get into. We're only here for the grading permit, but I will be concerned that my understanding of the affordable housing intent, and it's important because you're using housing density bonus law to build and get waivers to do the development. And my understanding is the intent of the density bonus law is for the affordable houses to be consistent with the neighbors, consistent in look and feel, whether it's a number of bedrooms. But when you look at the lot sizes being 60% of the same size of all the other lots, it's going to be quite clear that those will be not consistent with the rest of the houses. Any thoughts?
Architecture will be proposed at a later time, so there is a second bite of the apple that. So when it does come to the actual homes proposed for the affordability, the like kind in terms of bedroom count and scale will come into play at that later date. In terms of lot size, one of the things we think about with affordable housing in neighborhoods such as this, which are often considered more affluent neighborhoods, is people ask, how are they going to afford to maintain these homes? And when we take into account the cost of the house, they also have to take into account the cost of utilities, property taxes, and HOA and maintenance, all of the other components that all gets figured into either the cost to rent the home or cost to buy the home. Water costs, all of those things also have to be taken into account. So we do elect to make them slightly smaller in thinking of those future costs as well.
I'm uncomfortable.
Hey, Bob, let me just remind,
Yes.
we're not here to debate that with the applicant.
But aren't we here to approve this map?
But did you get the clarification that you asked that are the affordable lots smaller, and she has answered yes and
Yes.
given us reason, right?
Yes, she has.
Okay. Okay.
I have a
Susan.
question. So of the 17 units, are they all for sale?
These are being developed as for sale lots. Are you asking about the affordable specifically?
I'm asking if they're for rent or for sale.
We are processing the map. We are not processing the architecture. We anticipate that this will be a for sale product, but I don't have control over that at this time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any public speakers?
We do. We have 5 speakers, a few of which have time donations. First up is Anna Robin. Following Anna will be John Alspa.
I think that a plot map, there's a significant correlation to the size of the home that's going to be built on it, so I don't think that should be ignored by any means. Our homes have actually been there more than 20 years in the neighborhood, and the spring brings an incredible amount of shrubs, fauna, and flora on that lot that are not there in the winter and in the summer, and I don't think that that biology report is appropriately thorough enough of an analysis to be able to pass this today. This project is in a very high fire hazard severity zone, and under CEQA, it requires a detailed analysis of whether the project will substantially impair emergency response or evacuation plans, whether it will exacerbate wildfire risk or expose people or other structures to significant risk. The city's current analysis is only initial analysis, and that falls far short of the standard required by law. I don't think that the city's legal defenses would be very strong if a fire breaks out if they only conduct this initial analysis and rubber stamp it at this point. It's the city's responsibility to ensure our safety over state political agendas. Wildfires have ravaged California, and as a result, homeowners insurance in California saw a 21% increase in premium rates from May 21 to May 23. And that's just your average household. That does not account for the homes in the area of the proposed project. This year in 2024, California is in an insurance crisis, and our local neighborhood is no stranger to it. Some of our premiums have skyrocketed over 40% or have been canceled altogether. My neighbor's was canceled by American National last month. The vast majority of carriers, State Farm, Allstate, Farmers, and Hartford, are no longer offering new homeowners insurance policies, leaving many to resort to California's FAIR plan, which is the worst last resort. For my home, we were quoted over $9,000 a year if we were to uninsure the home. That is mentally exhausting to deal with that stress, and I don't think that any of us want that to happen again, going forward in the future. Our homes already meet all of the fire standards that the gentleman cited, but the carriers, they do not care. There is no way that the building of this excessive amount of homes will not impact all of our homeowners insurance policies, and I doubt that these new homes will be able to afford affordable coverage, particularly the 2 purple houses. Most likely, they will not get insurance at all. The applicant said it to herself, we deserve a full, thorough analysis, and it has not been done. Please do not approve this today and request the full EIR. Thank you.
Excuse me. Next, we have John Alspaugh with a time donation from Linda Alspaugh. If you could raise your hand, Linda. Thank you.
Council, staff, thank you for giving us the opportunity to come and speak. I apologize if I read a little bit, but I want to stay on point and not used to speaking in front of crowds, so it's a little stressful. As I said, my name is John Alspaugh. I've lived in Carlsbad and Encinitas since 1967, the last 2 decades in Encinitas. I've always known that I would never leave this unique and wonderful area. We're all fortunate to live here. The purchase of our home for Linda and I, as for many of us out here, was the largest investment of our life by a long shot. And we carefully researched the area and the zoning and the rest of it, and we saw what's been talked about a bit, the 1 home per acre zoning. And we relied on that in making our significant investment in buying and improving our home. And we know that the rules have been changing, and it's gotten difficult to stay with what we looked at years ago, but we feel that it's fundamentally unfair to face something that's so different from what we looked at when we made our purchase. Although the project is only 17 homes, it's not an apartment unit with hundreds of homes, it is out of character with what's in our neighborhood right now. And the neighbors, those who speak and those who've submitted things in writing, feel that this will significantly diminish the quality of life for everyone who lives up in this area. The proposed development is just different from what we've all expected all along. The attorneys have submitted information, I know, and the other speakers have talked about the ways that in some areas this oversteps what would be absolutely legally allowed, and I don't want to reiterate all of that, but I will comment that I agree that we deserve a full environmental impact report for this, and the density bonus calculations are complicated. And whether it should be gross or net, I've read from counsel for the homeowners that the way the numbers have been put together aren't correct. And I know it's a 10+ acre lot, but by the time you back out the setbacks and the swale for taking the water away and the undevelopable area, at the end of the day, we're pushing 17 homes onto about 6 acres. And many of the neighbors in the area, really all that I have spoken to, feel like it's a little bit too much. The parking's also a concern, and I'm a little confused by it now because there was one slide that said no on-street parking, but when the attorney was just up here, it said on-street parking, garage parking, and driveways. And one of the biggest concerns of the neighbors on my street, I live on Bella Vista, so we look at the lot from our front yard, is that we've got 17 homes. There's an average looking around our neighborhood of 2.5 to 3 cars per home. People have visitors. If there's going to be 50-plus cars up there, we don't want the overflow and the visitors to come down and be parking on our street and overwhelm the parking in front of all of our homes. That would maybe be the most negative impact on our neighborhood of the project. So we want to be sure that the project is self-parked and the project doesn't rely on use of Bella Vista in front of the homes that are there to create sufficient parking for these homes and their visitors. We truly believe if we can't park in front of our own homes, that will be an impact on our community that we can never go back from there. And to close, putting the legal considerations aside, just for a moment, I'd like to look a little bit at the bigger picture. Coastal North County is a special place. That's why we all live here. That's why we're all in this room tonight. And that's why we've invested our time and raised our children here, because we knew this is a place that we want to be. And we certainly understand the statewide housing crisis. We know that the city officials and commissions like this are under tremendous pressure to enable additional housing development to meet the needs. But we don't want to see the statewide problem allow us to lot by lot by lot see our neighborhood turned into Orange County. We don't want to live in Orange County. That's why we all live here in coastal northern San Diego County. And at the end of the day, this commission and the city council and all of you that are making these decisions, you represent us and yourselves, because I presume you live here as well. We don't represent the state of California. And we simply, as neighbors in the area, ask that to the extent you have the ability and the discretion to use the rules, regulations, and requirements that are at your disposal to reduce the scope of this project, that you seize that opportunity to do so, not to deny them what they're allowed to under the law, but not to give them additional consideration, additional bonus, additional units, if we have the ability to prevent that. I feel that that's in the best interest of our community. Like us, all of you live and work in Encinitas, and I think we should be working together to protect what we have, to preserve the character of the community as it's been for many years. We all know things will change going forward, but we should be mindful of retaining what we have. This is a beautiful community that we have, and we'd like to keep it that way going forward as much as we can, understanding the pressures that you all have to do what's right under the laws. We thank you for your efforts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Next is Diane Bond. Diane has 2 time donations, one from Patrick Ed, the other Carl Schneider. If Patrick and Carl could raise their hands. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Diane Bond, and I'm representing the United Citizens for the Responsible Development of Bella Vista. And they are opposed to this development as set forth in our letter, which was given in opposition to this request. And I basically want to touch on the 3 main issues of the problems with the subdivision map that's requested. First is that the subdivision map is only for subdivision. It doesn't include the actual residential homes that are proposed to be built there. So therefore, there has been no study of how the construction of those homes are going to have an environmental impact. The staff says that's mitigated because they're going to have those homes submitted to the Encinitas review, and that will take care of the issue. Well, I disagree, because it's a cumulative impact. There hasn't been a study of the cumulative impact of ongoing construction on the environmental issues that are at this site. And you've discussed, there are protected species at the site and protected flora. So that needs to be done. So for that reason, the map should not be approved. And also, it's kind of disingenuous, I think, that they come forward with, it's a potentially 17-unit lot. They're asking for a grading permit for a subdivision, but they're not saying that they're going to build 17 units on that lot. The grading could be done, the lots could be done, and they could come back before the city and change the request, whether it's the same developer or sold to somebody else. So for the fact that they did not include the homes within the request to be looked at, I think that says a lot. The main problem that I see with the bonus density law is there has been a representation that the state requires that the calculations be made on gross acreage. That is not true. There is nothing in the state law that addresses gross acreage. So when I was asked to look at this plan and do a bonus density calculation, I looked at the state law, I looked at the Encinitas building code and what it calls for, including the Encinitas building code bonus density ordinance. There's no mention of gross acreage. So in the letter in opposition to this request, I pointed out that there was a calculation made by staff on gross acreage and that is incorrect in accordance with state law, which does not mention gross acreage or net acreage or acreage of any kind, and the Encinitas code. So I was really interested to see what the city relies on, the city staff, when they say it requires gross acreage to do the calculation. And in the response that was put together by staff, I was expecting to see some case law interpreting the statute. I was expecting to see an Encinitas ordinance that said it has to be gross acreage, but I didn't see any of that. The basis upon which staff is claiming gross acreage is mandated is a letter that the city received in 2020 from the Department of Housing and Community Development. And I don't know if staff can pull up the response, but it's at page 190. So within this letter, the city had asked for an advisory opinion to the Department of Housing and Community Development about how to calculate the bonus density and formulating its own ordinance. And the department said the ordinance that was proposed, so we have to take this analysis in the context of which it was propositioned. The department said that the proposed ordinance would not be allowed. And the reason is, the current version, and I'm reading from the letter at page 194, and that is highlighted in yellow up there. So the current version of the city's ordinance calculates density based on gross acres rather than net acres. Now, that's a fact that the city is doing that, okay? Who gave it permission to do so? The city adopted gross acreage on the advice of its council because council opines that it was mandated by the state density bonus law. So council was Glenn Sabine. I don't know if you were familiar with Mr. Sabine, but he resigned in 2019, and he got a few things wrong, and this is one of them. The state does not mandate gross acreage. And then the letter goes on to state that there's gross acreage and I can't read it from here, but, and the density bonus law talks about gross acreage, but it doesn't. It doesn't mention gross acreage. It only mentions density. So when you do a bonus density calculation, the state law says you need to start from what would normally be permitted for that space. So under Encinitas' ordinances, we've seen that what would be permitted under that space would be allowed on a net acreage of 6.6, and that's where the calculation comes in. So that would end up being 7 units. That would be what would be permitted to be developed if there was no density bonus. So what the density bonus does is it takes that number and gives a bonus on top of it. So the bonus in this particular instance would be a 50% bonus because they're including 2 low-income units. So the maximum under the law is really basically 12 units, not 17. So there is no basis in fact or law that, as the applicant is saying, that the state mandates gross acreage. It simply does not exist. And if the city has been doing the wrong thing for over 5 years, well, bad on them, but that doesn't mean they get to continue to do it. So they need to take a hard look at what they are doing and what the ordinances say, and as the Planning Commission, you have the power to take a step back and look at what is being put forward and being told, we are being told this is what the state mandates, when it simply isn't true. So we would request that you deny this application.
Thank you.
Next, we have Scott Maloney. Scott Maloney, he has a time donation from Kelly Maloney. Okay, following Scott will be Dolores Welty.
Good evening, Scott Maloney, 1386 Bellamar Drive. First, I want to thank you for your public service. Mayor Krantz and the council appointed me as the vice chair of the Citizens Infrastructure Task Force last year, and so I know what it means to spend your evenings here and to volunteer your time and the amount of time you need to spend just to prepare for these meetings. So thank you for your public service. I am also a candidate on the November 5th ballot for the Liebenheim Water District Board of Directors. My wife and I have knocked on over 4,000 doors in Encinitas and met hundreds and hundreds of people. And I naively thought they would want to talk to me about water. Not so lucky. I'm probably telling you something you already know, but our community is angry. They are really angry. They feel disenfranchised. They feel shut out and shut up. They're upset not about the outcome, but about the process. And there is a massive backlash building in this community right now. And you know it, it's coming. I don't know if it's going to crescendo next month or later, but it's not going away. And the reason why I'm sharing that with you is because this is local government. It's very intimate. It's neighbors making decisions that affect neighbors. This is not happening in Washington or Sacramento, far away, decisions made by people we don't know. We all are living with these decisions, so I don't envy the position you're in. This is tough, and we get it. I also want to clarify something that was incorrectly stated by the developer's representative. We're not opposed to housing. We're not opposed to affordable housing on this site, even though it's surrounded by multi-million-dollar estates. What we're opposed to is what is a bad process, where the environment and public safety is clearly being shortchanged. We are asking you for a process that restores the community's faith in its local government because it's gone, and it's going to take a while to come back. I don't want to try to repeat everything that was already said. Some very articulate speakers preceded me, but we are specifically asking you to use your discretion to properly calculate the number of homes that should be built on this property. It is absolutely incorrect to say that the state's density bonus law requires gross. That is not true. And it's been stated both in the Blake Law Firm and the Latham Watkins Law Firm letters that are part of this administrative record. We're talking about building 17 homes on 6 acres, not 11 acres. And I have to tell you, it's offensive to me when the developer characterizes the 3 acres of open space as some kind of concession. That open space is uninhabitable. It's undevelopable. You couldn't permit building it. It's a deep canyon with sensitive habitat. And if you want any evidence, look at the video or the picture, the aerial picture they showed you of the most recent development in our neighborhood along Bella Azul. It stops well before that canyon. If someone could have developed in there, they would have a long time ago. So to suggest that somehow that's a concession to the environment or the community is just insulting. Using the net versus the gross acreage to permit the appropriate number of houses is absolutely in your jurisdiction. The letter from the California Housing Agency that was cited as evidence for the gross is just guidance. It's not regulation. It's not the law. And as you know, no 2 developments are the same. No 2 density housing bonus projects are the same. And so while you may have used gross in other projects, this project is very different. And using the gross creates very serious environmental and public safety impacts that could be avoided if you used the net, which again is in your jurisdiction. Just one example, and this was touched on earlier, is the waiver they're asking for a private road, which they need so they can't meet the city's requirements for the width and depth. What they're asking for would not allow a full fire apparatus into that cul-de-sac if there is ever a fire. How is that a good outcome for anybody? This is absolutely a public health and safety risk in an area that was previously mentioned backs up to a canyon that's a fire hazard, in an area that is a high fire risk where people either can't get insurance or can't pay for their insurance. Not only do I feel like you have a legal and discretionary authority to deny this project based on these facts, I believe you have a moral obligation to, based on the public safety impacts. I want to turn my attention just briefly to the Latham and Watkins letter that was submitted in the record. I can't touch on all the points in the limited time that I have, but I do want to talk about the Fish and Wildlife comment letter. Fish and Wildlife is the state's premier resource agency charged with protecting the state's resources. Some of the best scientists in the world work at Fish and Wildlife. And they opine that the site likely has sensitive habitat. And you heard from the applicant's biologist today, they can't disprove that because they didn't do the studies. There is enough doubt for you to determine that there could be sensitive habitat on that site as Fish and Wildlife believe exists. The reason why this is important is because the failure to do the full environmental impact report denies knowledge of what exists there. And why that's important is because if there is in fact sensitive habitat, this project then falls into the appealable jurisdiction of the California Coastal Commission, which the developer clearly wants to avoid. And that's why we feel like this is another just opportunity to shortchange the process by not allowing for the full environmental review. So I just want to close by, I'm glad that that is going to be my close. I just want to close by reiterating that we're asking you not to approve the project tonight. Please require the developer and your staff to work on a complete and thorough environmental impact report, which I think will reveal the need for the net, not the gross calculation that will then prevent the public safety and health issues that we're concerned about. Thank you.
Okay.
Next is Dolores Welty. Following Dolores will be Peter Martinson and then Kathy Roberts.
Dolores Welty, and I've been coming forth because of grading, and I heard 8-foot cut and 4-foot fill. I want to ask if that is a rule you're following on this project?
Yes, if it exceeds 8 feet in cut for fill, it requires a design review permit.
You'll have to speak a little louder for me.
It triggers, the project includes a design review permit because the project includes a design review permit because some of the grading proposed exceeds 4 feet of cut, 4 feet of fill and 8 feet of cut. So a design review permit is included with the project.
Will you go over that 4 feet of fill?
Because the grading operation does include greater than 4 feet of fill and greater than 8 feet of cut, there is a associated design review permit for the project.
Right. And that's because it is a slope. And it rises 30 feet from the street and goes 40 feet, drops 40 feet to the bluff. And what I am concerned about, of course, is excessive fill on the bluff, which may not be as steady as you might think it is, and then you have bluff collapse, as you did at the 48 houses off La Costa. Sometimes the developer does not protect that loose dirt as he should. And I can understand cut and fill. How deep do you go for a sewage line?
I would have to defer to the civil engineer for a more specific answer.
I read, I think, that water table is 5 feet below the surface. Is that correct?
It just depends where you are. The depth of the sewer line just depends where the existing sewer main is, so you'd have to connect to the main. It just depends where you are in the city.
Is that going to be on Bella Vista, or is it going to be in the private road?
The main line is in Bella Vista, and then the proposed sewer main is underground in the private road to connect to Bella Vista's main sewer main.
Okay. Well, you've heard what I think.
Next is Peter Martinson with a time donation from Ann Martinson. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Peter Martinson, 1379 Bellamar. And thank you, staff. Jay, would you pull up one of the overlays of the site? I'm not really concerned. Maybe it's a nice one. Just so we can have a
You
look
just
at it.
need a aerial photo?
Yeah, just an aerial photo.
Okay.
Because I think, you've heard a lot here, and obviously you've got a lot of concerned citizens here. So that's what I represent, president of the HOA for Bellamar, but there's also a letter. I hope you read everything that the community's provided you over the last 3 years here, because they've written a lot. Letters, emails, there's even a survey in there. There's 5 HOAs, well, 4 HOAs, and then the Bella Azul community leader signing their concerns about this development proposal, right? And you've heard a lot of them here, but it's really the things of the community communicating to you, just like Dolores did, the concerns. And we're having a great, meeting here, which is fantastic. A lot of high-paid people here presenting colorful slides. What would be helpful, and it sounded like one of the commissioners has actually been to the site, Dolores brings it up, it's not flat, right? I think that's the first thing that you'd want to go if you actually checked it out. It's a steep slope. Right at the top, it slopes down very considerably. There's 20 and 40% slopes there, and that's part of the concerns here the community has, whether it's hydrology and the runoff from the water. And that doesn't feel that it's been addressed. The way that it's been addressed here is to then put down at the bottom a retaining pool. A retaining pool similar to the ones like was at Urquiza, when you remember that overflowed with the 100-year storms that came year after year and then flooded into the houses below it. So the community is concerned about design applications like that haven't been properly engineered and considered. In fact, there was the issue here, if you go up Bella Azul, that was engineered for more water and storm runoff inappropriately. It couldn't handle those storm runs, so it had to be redesigned. So that's where a lot of the concerns of the community comes through, as you're hearing. It's water, runoff, hydrology. It's more of a clay soil up there. And so those are issues. Other issues, fire, right? A 6-foot firewall is proposed. Now, I know we've got professionals here who say, that'll stop it. A lot of the community remembers just north of here is where the fire at La Costa occurred. Do you remember that, the one that went across El Camino? Not sure a little 6-foot firewall would stop that, right? What's proposed here is rather than having, houses with vegetation around it that can have some clearance for that fire, is to pack in 17 homes. Now, yes, there's considerations there, but that's going to exacerbate the fire jumping over and going through, which is the community's concerns as well. And so you start going through those type of opportunities, and that's where they're looking at this and saying, doesn't feel like the full review of that site has been done appropriately. Flora and fauna, it's easy to look at this and say, I don't see any flora and fauna, right? But what you don't see is down here at the bottom left is actually a right-of-way where there's a trail. It's about probably 12 to 15 feet wide. That's where your bobcats come through. That's where your coyotes come through. Animals like that go up and over to the other side, right? So if you put a giant community in there, you're going to limit their going through. But hey, if you swing by the site, 6 times a year, you might not see them. But the community sent in the photos of those going through. And so those are where the concerns are, is that there's going to be significant impact to this by the overdevelopment that's being proposed on it. And that's why the letters do say, what is it, supermax density bonus is what it seems to be proposed here, right? When it should be rural, RR1, 6 homes appropriately cited, more for the safety of the community, et cetera, as you've heard. So that's where the community says there's going to be significant impact on this, and it needs to go to a full EIR and request that you deny this proposal today. And again, there are a lot of letters that have been submitted, so I would wish that you'd read them and go through. There's even a survey that was done and submitted where the community said what their view is on it. So that's where, again, it would be worthwhile just looking at it so you know what the constituents out there view it. It wasn't all opposed, right? There was a very, most were, but it would be worthwhile just seeing where that fully falls out. But if you get a chance, you should look at the site, because it's very easy to look at this and see it being flat on this proposal. But there's a lot of issues here with it being sloped, steep slopes in the back, et cetera, that would require a full review. Thank you.
Our final speaker is Kathy Roberts.
Hi, I live at can you pull that map please back up again? I live at 1643 Bella Laguna Court. If you can look at the map, I'm right next to that red line. So I've been here 25 years, blessed to live in this area. Like, look at that open space I've had, amazing. Always thought there was going to be, it's going to be built, totally get that. 6 homes, what we thought. 17, that's a lot. The biologist, I sat by him. I lived there for 25 years. Every night, right now, we have 6 coyotes. We have there's 3 pups, and the other 3, we have a bobcat that comes pretty much every 4 to 5 days. We have red-tailed hawks. We have owls. Snakes, I'm actually happy that you're going to build so I can get rid of the snakes, because I'm scared of those. So that's I'm okay with. But as far as the habitat, we have a lot of habitat there that I think that you overlooked on this area. The other thing is, I agree with the other speaker. That other home, Bella Azul, there was going to be 6 homes. When we were up there, there was none of those other homes on Bella Azul. That development got developed. That whole area got wiped out because they didn't do the proper drainage. And we live on that slope, and we actually have a tiered lot. So I'm very concerned about how you're going to drain that. We're one of the only lots in our community that can drain out to the street. Everybody else, down into the canyon, everybody else has to drain out to the street. So I'm very curious how they're going to do it, because we have such a huge space before it becomes to the cliff. The other thing I wanted to bring up, was fire insurance. My neighbor they just sold. They got quoted $16,000 to have their right next to us. Luckily, they insured us, which I paid right away because I'm like, oh my God. But $16,000. So I'm concerned with your people to get fire insurance, because it is incredibly hard. It's not will it burn, it's when it's going to burn. This is when is this going to burn. This is high fire. The other thing is these 2 purple lots. My daughter is head of recruiting. My son-in-law is a engineer at SpaceX. They cannot afford to live in Encinitas. And so I would love them to live in the 2 purple lots because they had to buy in North Carlsbad. So I'm really concerned that this is just so out of character for this area. I agree that we should have building there, but 17 is too much. It's not okay. It doesn't fit. And I really appreciate you guys really looking at all this and saying no to this project.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, that's the end of the public speaker slips. I will close the public comment. Oh, sorry, yes, sorry. If the applicant would like some time for rebuttal, we'll give you 3 minutes.
Drainage a little bit? And the private road standard in terms of fire.
Brian Artolino, civil engineer on the project. Thank you so much, planning commissioners, for hearing us tonight. In terms of the couple of matters that were brought up in terms of drainage, and much of this is granted by client and applicant, I actually made them wait a very, very long time to basically weed out all of the issues with this project. Principally, soils erosion. Having worked on Bella Azul Court, I did both of those subdivisions to the south, plus I worked on Blue Heron, the subdivisions south of that. So having spent a great deal of time in this neighborhood working on these projects, I was well aware of the soils issues, the drainage issues, the fire issues, the habitat issues. So I wouldn't actually draw a lot line until we actually navigated all of these matters, meaning constraints map from biology, soils constraints map in terms of buffer, fire buffer in terms of basically where is that going to land, and then lastly, basically what I was allowed to do for drainage. Because I was never thrilled with the Bella Azul Court design because we were kind of forced into that by the city engineering department at the time. But taking that experience, we've utilized that to basically maximize this design to the greatest extent possible. So drainage to the east side, we are not allowed to drain over land. Not allowable. It's not wise. It's a highly erosive soil. And so therefore, we're using basically infiltration pits for the purposes of the drainage to the east. And in the case of emergency event, we're going to pump to the west. But the goal is basically, based on the soils reports and based on the infiltration rates, we can perfectly drain to the east using infiltration pits. What was the other thing you want me to talk about?
The private road.
Oh, private road.
and the fire.
So private road is basically you can serve up to infinite number of homes on a 24-foot wide road. And so we have 17, and so therefore our road is 24 feet. We have parking stalls on either side of the street in terms of doing parking pockets to kind of promote as much landscape and accessibility and aesthetic as possible. So we have 17 parking stalls. And I know one thing that the neighborhood always brings up is basically, is there going to be parking spillover into the street? And Jay, if you wanted to amuse me, you could probably bring up a Google Street View right now, and you're not going to see a single car parked on that street. We've had multiple community meetings out there. I've been out there multiple times. I've met with a number of community members, both informally and formally. And we'd be sitting out there, and there'd be a whole bunch of us. There might be 3 cars that pass by, but not a single car parked on the street. That's not true. That is not true. Jay, do you want to entertain me? Just for fun.
If you could be quiet in the audience, please.
So I'm just saying we've exceeded the requirements of the city for parking. We've exceeded the requirements of the city for safety. We've exceeded the requirements for the city on every count. So if you have any questions for me, we've taken great pains. I've worked on a lot of density bonus projects over the years, and this is actually one of the ones I'm most proud of because it is actually the most modest of the bulk that we've done. So, all right, if you have any more questions for me, I'm available.
thing, and this is less for the commissioners and obviously the city attorney who's probably familiar with this, but just for the community. I know there was an attorney that came up here that stated that there was nothing about gross acreage in the state density bonus law, so I just wanted to give the section. It's 65915F, and it specifically says, for the purposes of this chapter, density bonus means a density increase over the otherwise maximum allowable gross residential density, et cetera, et cetera. So if we need a reference point, that's the code. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, I am going to close the public comment and open it up to commissioner deliberation. Yes, is there a need? Yeah, okay. So we're going to take a short break and we will reconvene here at 8 o'clock in 10 minutes.
How many house designs do you guys have?
The next step would be the go back through kind of built on property that is got sensitive areas.
So you're just doing grading tonight?
So it's just the back. Yes, just the And the reason
Well, anyway, when they said the crow's back, Sierra Club was but they had this big strong and Sierra Club was public Encinitas has never finished their study. That's the idea of your making. Yeah. What's interesting is while traffic.
Yeah. All right, if we could settle down in your seats again, we'd like to restart the hearing. All right, please settle down. Okay, we are starting commissioner deliberation, and I'll look to my colleagues for initial thoughts.
You know, I think my initial thoughts are, when I talk to the applicant, I'm disappointed in the lot sizes, and I think they've made a business decision, which is understandable, to do, it's premised upon an affordable housing density bonus, and the two affordable housing units are squeezed. I appreciate the fact that they're not asking for concessions. I think that's the first density bonus application we've seen that I think I can recall that there aren't any financial concessions of the city. We've seen lot adjustments on multiple projects, discussions on consistency with neighborhoods, but we've also had multiple conversations about projects when they've come to us about the size of the units, the location of the units, that they're not too different, whether it's in the multi-story Quail Meadows project, when they first said we're going to put them all over here. I think even on La Costa 28, we talked about the design of the units, and they didn't even have windows in the front. Again, that's a different process. We don't have that design review today. But we are reviewing a map, and they've made some business decisions about the site. They could draw the lines anywhere they wanted to. They have a fixed site. They can draw the lines where they wanted. And in this particular case, the base premise of the affordability component seems to be a business decision to make them the smallest. And I just find that disingenuous. But other than that, it could she wrench into new state law that we haven't really seen yet, the super stack, which I'm sure we'll see at some point, but we haven't seen yet. And I know that that is out in the Amazon cloud somewhere. Actually, it's a law now. We just haven't had a lot of discussions about it. So
I think the
that's my
lot
initial
size,
reaction.
The lot size issue to me, I'm not as concerned about. And I think it gets particularly challenging with for sale product, especially if you're talking about a multi-million-dollar neighborhood houses, to to find a family that qualifies as very low income and then to turn around. I don't think the larger lot sizes are affordable to them. And so I agree with some of the points that were being made about upkeep and maintenance of your home, that I think the parity to me is that they are included in the neighborhood and they live as neighbors to the other residents there. But they are paying significantly less and they can afford significantly less. And I think it's reasonable to think that they might be small, they would be the smaller lots, and that it's nice that they're included in there and that they haven't tried to pay an in lieu fee or move them off, like create them somewhere else. And so to me, there's some parity still.
Create the in lieu, then they're really not getting. Can you do the in lieu and
No,
still do
that
density
wouldn't be
bonus?
an
So
option,
you
but-
can't do it. But I also understand that the business model is such that sometimes these affordable homes are acquired by affordable home companies like Interfaith or Affirmed or Chelsea, and they buy the houses. So they have the capacity to pay those bills. They're not always sold to the individual unit. They're sold to companies who are in the affordable home business, but they acquire the lots. And then they work with they can lease them back to the tenant, but Affirmed owns the project, the two houses, not the individual person. Yes, they're deed restricted, Affirm owns them. So the business model is a little bit different, and that could allow for individuals to be in those houses, but not actually own those houses. So it doesn't say that they are deed restricted and the people that are in them qualify, but they don't have to qualify to buy the house. That actually be bought by somebody else. So the business model is evolving for these for sale products, but that's neither here nor there. These are business decisions that they're making. I'm not here to make a business decision for them. I just don't like the way they presented it. But she did bring up good points that it is expensive to get homeowners insurance. I think everybody in the city or in California understands it's hard to get homeowners insurance. Mm-hmm. The gentleman here who's running for the water district, I'd like to talk to you because you can see my water bill. Love to talk to you about that, Scott, when after your election bill and my water pressure on my water regulator. That's costing me lots of money. I was a little confused on the drainage, and we can ask the questions about the staff and the hydrology, about where they're putting the drainage. I was confused in the yellow. One of the drainage basins was going to be graded, and I thought that was a buffer zone, so I was a little confused on the second drainage location. But I'm getting off topic. I guess we're talking about macro issues here. So I was a little concerned, even though the biologist came up, and both that and the Latham and Watkins letter really talked about the biology a little bit. I just didn't know if that was something I was completely satisfied with. So those are my thoughts.
Brent, where do you stand on the biology?
Oh, on the biology of it, gosh, I mean, certainly there were some gaps, but I didn't. It's going to be understandable for a district like this or an area like that. There's going to be difficulties in getting a complete assessment at any time of the year. I also had some issues with fire protection, of course, whether that's entirely been mitigated or not. I felt a little bit, there was a little bit of attention, even though we're not discussing the construction of the homes, there was some remarks made about additional fire protection for the structures. And so I guess that was a little bit helpful to that. And a fire protection wall also seemed like a wall that was going to be a barrier towards runoff. And I was concerned of how that would impact that canyon and that location. I was wondering if other surrounding areas were utilizing barrier walls in that way. Looking at the general overview and the general maps, I mean, it didn't look that far off from a lot of the surrounding neighborhoods. I mean, there was one in one of the pictures where we can count 12 or more homes just in the photo we could see. Mm-hmm. So it does appear that it's, designed to have structures throughout the area.
Okay. Susan, thoughts?
I had a question probably for the attorney. When these kinds of projects are laid out and they're going to have an HOA and the anticipation is they're for sale, wouldn't the state mandate mean that the affordable units as well as the others would have their grounds upkeep and exteriors of buildings and things be part of their HOA, or no?
It depends on how the homeowners association is set up. I don't know if the applicant has discussion about how that's going to be set up. Do you know how that's going to be set up yet, or no? We don't know. Okay. So generally, the question is, what is common space? There's not always one way to do it. At minimum, we know that the road will be communally maintained, but quite often you'll see situations where the homeowners association is not responsible for the upkeep of the lots or, the outside areas in the front yards. That rather, if it's going to be subdivided, that you control your own lot, and then the HOA just owns what I'm going to call community space, which is different than regulations. It is very typical that a HOA will have regulations that say things like, we're going to fine you if you don't keep your property up and beautiful, and you can't have cars parked in certain locations and those sorts of things.
So I know that, is this considered a planned unit development? No, it's,
No, this is not a planned unit development. This is essentially a traditional subdivision. The only difference is that the homeowners association would own community land. So I'm assuming it would end up being the drainage areas and the open, well, I guess the open space would be deeded to an outside group. But the drainage areas, the streets, essentially the common territory would be owned by the HOA.
so the only designated common thing right now is the private road.
I'm purely speculating, but I would speculate that it would also include the drainage areas and the pipes and things that serve the entire community.
Okay, I just wanted to get a better idea of who's going to be responsible for what part.
I have a hard time seeing this project differently than all the neighbors around it. A bit to Brent's point earlier, it's a big open field, been disturbed, graded, weed whacked, all the rest of that. And it looks like it's exactly the way those other properties associations were prior to them being built. I don't see how this project is any closer to the hillside, any more in danger of fire than any other project out there. How they're proposing anything that's truly different than what those other houses benefit from. Relating to flora and fauna and the biology, I keep thinking, like, what if they were proposing 5 houses? We're talking about an area that is already disturbed, and I don't think there's any question about, like, all of the rare and endangered and species, that's all that chaparral and that lower slope area that is already being set aside. So I don't know what else you would do above and beyond that to, quote, mitigate for that or to protect that any further. I mean, what we're talking about is developing on a disturbed site and setting aside all of the area that is undisturbed. So I think almost irregardless of the number of units, if they were coming back for 5 units, I don't think we'd have any problem with them separating off a third of the site and saying that's open space and it's going to stay that way. So to me, the biology and the examination of that, I feel like they're doing it. They're protecting all the space, any of the terrain that is of value to a wildlife. So There's a lot of talk about gross versus net area. We went through all this at our last meeting, and I think, it's a common refrain. We've heard it a lot. There is confusion about it, and in some ways, when they cite this HCD letter, that letter is intended to guide the city in how they calculate the number of potential future homes in their housing element. And then HCD flips their approach when you come to actually propose a project, then they start using gross. And it's basically the state trying to say, how do we maximize the production of housing? They don't want you to undercount the potential, or they don't want you to overcount the potential for housing, and then they don't want you to undercount the delivery of the housing. So we've been through this on a number of projects. Very clearly, I think we are consistent to calculate it on gross acreage to determine the number of units that would be allowed out there. Fire access road, it's 24 feet wide. That's a real standard fire access lane. There's a turnaround at the end. All of that seems to be very dialed in with the fire code and consistent with any other project that we've seen come through here. I think there's some confusion about the parking and how that might impact this fire access road. The parking is an additional space built outside of the curb line, so those cars are not lining the curb and impacting the 24 feet. It's a 24 feet clear, and then the cars are parking in alcoves off of that. Fire severity insurance, I don't think we can address whether a house can get insurance or not. I think we're here to decide, is it appropriate that there be houses there? And I don't know that insurance comes into, it's a concern for all of us, but I don't think that this one project is a specific insurance risk any more so than any of the other houses that are built out there. There was some caution or something about the grading plan not being followed, and then somehow the developer changing the number of lots or so. I just didn't follow that argument or logic. If anything, that would result in fewer houses, which seems to be the general consensus of what a lot of the opponents have asked for, is fewer houses. So I don't see how that impacts our decision, my decision here tonight. So to me, this seems like a pretty straightforward project. There are waivers being requested for lot size, lot width, and depth setbacks. We kind of went through this again last week with another very similar project. That's completely within their bounds, and I don't think I could demonstrate that they don't need those. I agree with your comment, Brent. When I look at an aerial map, this looks like every other development out there. And it feels like it's just filling in a gap that is there, and it's private property, and it's been zoned for residential. So I would support this project tonight. I think we may, need a little discussion on it, but that's my position.
Well, as far as all of the commenters, they were all negative, and I do feel my heart goes out to the community for your concerns. However, the property owner has rights too, and they have the right to develop. It seems to me that it does it's similar to the other property, less unique. It's not as unique as the property we looked at in our last meeting, but it is near sensitive habitat and a lagoon, Betaquitos. So I'm happy to see the preservation of the area closest towards the lagoon. I think we have to be glad whenever we have preservation of natural habitat, and it will help the flora and fauna survive. I think in terms of 17 units, these are going to be very expensive homes overall. I'm not so sure that 2 affordable units will be very affordable, even though technically it is stipulated that they will be. Is there, I didn't see in the report, are there inclusive units? Is our inclusionary policy effective?
Yes, there's inclusionary units.
I think that's reflected, Susan, in that one is restricted for 55 years and the other is restricted forever.
Forever.
And that's the inclusionary unit.
So there's just one that is in perpetuity?
Yes.
Well, I think that's a very low bar for developing right next to the lagoon, basically. But I believe they're within their rights as far as meeting objective standards for density bonus law. I think with regard to the gross and net square footage, that we should be going with net because of our unique topography. We have steep slopes, we have wetlands, we have a lot of things on various sites. I, again, see it as a deficiency that is at the state level, basically. So there's not a lot I can do in terms of that, other than say that I feel for the community that it's not a great thing that it's viewed as a larger than 6.6 acres. And I think in this case, it is not the unique ecological gem that the project was in the other site. This particular, it's not a, it is a beautiful area, and but it is already developed around with very similar property, and the lot sizes, despite the former rural use, and I do mourn the loss of all of our agricultural areas, but it's comparable. So I probably will be in support of this.
Any further thoughts, Brent?
The density bonus numbers fall where they are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just the reality.
Okay.
So,
I think the council for the neighbors brought up, and the neighbors also brought up kind of, we go down various decision trees, and one of the decision trees right up front is the negative deck versus the EIR. And it's kind of, that's one decision tree, and clearly the net versus gross and the density bonus component is another decision tree, and all the things that happen with the density bonus. Your point about 5 houses, would we be talking about? I would be talking about flora and fauna if it were one house. And I think that given the unique, where we are in San Diego, near the lagoon, one of the greatest biodiverse counties in the United States. Right now is a beautiful time to see the birds on the flyways in the lagoons. It's really an amazing place to be, and we have an obligation to protect it. So looking at Department of Fish and Wildlife's comments to the mitigated negative deck, I don't think that those were really addressed well enough. I mean, I know there are right up front in the staff report, there are bullets that say why the city went down the path of an M&D versus, and that's probably, we've had this a couple of times. I tend to think a full EIR is better. It allows comments like the flora and fauna to be looked at, and I don't see a traffic issue here, although 17 units, but there's houses all over the place here. So I don't see, we're not looking at Westlake and Encinitas Boulevard and going to level F or level C. So I do think that if it were 5 houses or if it was 1 house, I would be concerned about the impact on the site.
Let me ask you this, though. Do you see the site as all equal value from a habitat standpoint? I mean, clearly to me, it seems like that that eastern portion that slopes off, that's an undisturbed habitat down there. But
Agreed.
The upper section seems to be totally disturbed. I don't think anybody's talking about hawks and owls roosting in the upper portion.
No, because there isn't
down.
anything there, and
Yeah,
and it's been, there's not habitat for them, but I'm sure they're eating the squirrels and eating, the hawks are sitting in the trees. I have them in my house, so I know what they're eating. They're eating the squirrels that are running through the field. So, but they're not protected species, and I understand that when we get down to the nitty gritty, it's not a special status bird. We don't have a gnatcatcher. I mean, look, we get really down to the nitty gritty. We can only do so much unless we can show that there is a rare species that's going to be impacted, and that is the law. If we had a gnatcatcher and the biologist found a gnatcatcher, different decision tree. If he had found some of these special species that could be there, so my concern is we didn't do enough study to find out if they were there. So, and that's where a full EIR probably would have addressed that rather than what I feel is a cursory review on the biology. So when you go down the negative deck, it looked like the biology report became a little bit thin. And a full EIR probably would have been more complete. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the biology reports are the same, whether it's a full EIR and Anna's nodding her head. So, maybe I should stop rambling and ask her the question. Is the biology report that would be done tonight on the MND the same level of biology report that would have been done under a full EIR?
So that's my understanding, but we do have our environmental consultant here tonight that I would defer to them to triple confirm that. But I've always understood that biological reports have their established thresholds and requirements, and we wouldn't ask for anything different more because we want a full picture of the
I just
site.
don't know if the MND is like biology report A, and if you do a full EIR, it's a biology report B. I don't know that. So that's if someone on staff can share that, or maybe the biology, I'm not sure. So I don't know who to ask.
Consultant here.
Lori's here.
Hi, Lori Spar from Recon Environmental. To answer your question, it would be the same bio report.
Oh, well, there you go.
The mitigated negative declaration under CEQA would be as comprehensive to be able to meet the threshold questions and to reach the conclusions regarding significance.
So can I ask her a question? All right. So what we have in this report meets both MND review and a full EIR review. It'd be the same report, the same level of tests or for both.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, okay. Learn something new every day. I feel constrained at times because we've had these projects come through, and I think the last week's project was very similar in terms of a large portion of the site was really undevelopable, but the way the state has read that those have to be included in the calculation, the net versus gross. So if it were just down to the 6.x acres versus the 10.1 acres, there would be different home amounts on the site, whether it's 12 or 17. One thing that the applicant did bring up that we haven't talked about, and I'll look to Scott for this, is the new law that's passed. She referenced the super stacking. And I bring it up because having lived in a living Hine and seen projects come through that repeatedly get pushback from the neighbors, eventually turn into the worst case scenario. The Quail Garden site originally was 28 or 32 houses, and that was pushed, and now it's 458 units. The Goodson site was going to be senior housing at 100 units, and now it's 283 units. So there's a trade-off, and there's a risk-adjusted play that you have to concern yourselves with. If it's not this, it could be something else. We all have to think about that. We think about it up here. I think about it. So Scott, there's a new law that was recently passed.
Right. So I think what they're referring to is the super density bonus, which is essentially you get an additional density bonus. Normally, you only get one density bonus. Under subsection V of Government Code Section 65915, you can potentially get 2 density bonuses. So in other words, it's theoretically possible if you have high enough affordability percentages, you can get double the density that you would otherwise be allowed to get.
You'd have to increase your affordable component.
Correct. So you could not build a 100% market rate project to be able to get that. You would have to provide substantially, don't quote me on this, but roughly, I think it's 37.5% of your units would have to meet affordability requirements
To get
be able
the double
to get
density.
that. If that's all low income numbers, but regardless, that's
It's
far afield of where we need to be. But yes, it's theoretically possible to get more units than they've proposed.
And I just wanted to address that because the applicant stated that. And there's been multiple projects in Encinitas over the last 5 years that get bigger and bigger and bigger every time you push back. Because the goalposts move, because the laws change. And the laws are changing outside of the city of Encinitas and outside of this planning commission. And so the goalposts keep moving, and they've moved a lot. This is a project in a neighborhood of existing homes, and I wrestle with it, but it does satisfy the conditions that we have here at the commission that we have to go by, because those are the laws. So I wrestle, Chair, with it, as you know I do, with all of this, and I have voted no at times when I think that the information is insignificant to approve. I will probably support this project with angst, but I think I understand the obligations and what's been presented and what we've had experience with over the last 12 months.
Okay. I'll test that, and I make a motion to approve the project.
I'll second that.
Okay.
I will second.
Okay.
I would like, can we have just one more discussion point?
Sure.
That they are not taking down mature trees, if that makes you feel better.
Yeah. And just a point of clarification, Susan, Brent seconded the motion before you did. Okay. Okay. I'd like to call the vote. Okay, that motion passes 4-0. The project is approved. Okay, we'll give just a second for the room to clear, of those who are clearing. Our next project tonight is the Camino Apartments, case number DR 006027, 2023. Esteban Dana is the staff planner, and any disclosures on this project from the commission?
Been by the location? Familiar with
Been
it?
by the location.
I think we've each visited, and I have not talked to anybody regarding it.
Agreed, same.
Okay. Folks, if you could move your conversations outside, that would be appreciated. Okay, Esteban.
Good evening. Excuse me. There we go. Sorry. Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Commission. Today I will be presenting the Camino Apartments Design Review application. The project site is located along the east side of El Camino Real, just north of Garden View Road. The site is surrounded by open space to the west across El Camino Real, offices to the east, a retail nursery to the north, and a retail bank and medical offices to the south. The Camino Apartments site was previously known as Site 6A, which was included as part of the city's 2013 to 2021 housing element update. The update rezoned 15 properties throughout Encinitas to allow multifamily residential development with a maximum density of 30 dwelling units per acre. The project seeks approval of a design review permit for the construction of a 4-story, 87-unit for-rent apartment building. Of the 87 units, 75 are designated as market rate units, and 12 are designated as very low income units. A total of 108 parking spaces are planned within the project, and the proposed amenities include a pool area with cabanas, fitness areas, resident lounge, and social nodes accessible to all 87 units. State density bonus law allows a development to increase an allowable density above the maximum density set under the city's general plan in exchange for affordable housing. Density bonus law allows 2 incentives or concessions and unlimited waivers. The project does not request any incentives or concessions, and as listed on the screen and identified in the staff report and the density bonus report, the project proposes 8 waivers. This rendering shows the proposed building as seen from El Camino Real. The project design complies with all applicable design standards identified in the City of Encinitas Design Standards and Guidelines, with the exception of 2 items waived as allowed by density bonus law. This rendering shows the proposed building facing south with El Camino Real running along the right side of the image. And facing north, this rendering shows the proposed building with El Camino Real running along the left portion of the image. This rendering shows the rear of the proposed building while facing northwest. Both covered and open parking are visible on the right side of the image. The project is statutorily exempt from CEQA review under Government Code Section 65583.2, subsections H and I, which provide that if a housing development project is located on a site by right approval and contains at least 20% affordable units and does not require a subdivision, then the design review approval does not constitute a project under CEQA. Notice of this public hearing was mailed, posted at City Hall, and posted on the city's website on October 4th. Staff did not receive any comments from the public. Staff did respond to 1 email asking for the number of parking spaces proposed on the project. 1 citizen participation program meeting was held for the project in April of 2023. The meeting was attended by 1 member of the public. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt the resolution approving the project. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any initial questions for staff, clarifications?
On page 2 of your report, beginning in the paragraph, as required by Government Code 65583.2, in the middle is a statement that reads, a by right project may not be subject to the discretionary approval that constitutes a project under the California CEQA Act. Can you just, however, the by right process does not exempt development proposals from design review. So this is the first one so this is a housing element site, and this is, can you just walk me through your definition of by right? And because obviously all the waivers that they're asking for is pretty much conditioned upon it being a by right. And there's lots of different definitions of by right, so I'd like to hear yours.
Sure. So with the housing element update, this property was zoned R30, which does not require any discretionary permit for multifamily residential. So that is a by right use that is allowed for the property.
So the housing element was key in this definition of by right. This is a housing element site, R30, and with that, it pretty much doesn't require any, we're pretty much just having to rubber stamp this. I'm talking a little bit ahead of my game here, but, so I just want to make sure. So R30, housing element site, density bonus, waivers, concessions, but we're dealing with a much different a different definition of by right. Much different, but just a more clear and concise definition of by right.
So the R30, the types of uses that are allowed in an R30 property would be multifamily residential up to 30 units per acre. Separately, you have a density bonus option that is state law. So if you're not using density bonus law, you can still have 30 units per acre on that property.
Okay, thank you. That was just more of a clarification.
Thank you. With that, we will, did you have questions? Okay.
Oh, wait. Page 2, this is an SB 330. How does it's right below it, I guess, is as an SB 330, they're using design guidelines prior to the adoption of, no, they're using.
I think it's the objective design.
So how does SB 330 apply to this project?
Sure. So SB 330 allows the project to use the standards that are in effect at the time of application. So once the city deems that the application is complete under SB 330, then whatever standards are applicable at that time are the standards that apply, even if the standards change as the project moves through the process.
So when was the date that this was deemed applied? So I just have an idea of what design standards, because I know the chair has great insights into the design standards. So I'm just trying to make sure I know which ones we're applying.
Just to be clear, he's asking if it's under the new objective design standards.
Sorry.
Yes, that is
I'm
correct.
battling.
Yeah, the
Thank
SB
you.
330 was, or the application was deemed complete after the current standards are in place.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about the long-winded question.
Okay, if the applicant is here and would like to address the commission.
All right. Hello. Good evening. Brian Grover, applicant representative. And we don't have a formal presentation. We're here to answer any questions that you might have. We have our design team, architect, engineer, biologist, and so on, traffic engineer. Yeah, we're just here to answer questions. Just a couple things that I would note that weren't in staff's presentation. This property is not located in the coastal zone. I think there were some questions from some neighbors about how high the building is relative to the top of slope to the east of it. And I can answer that. It's about 7 feet below the top of slope. So if you're standing at grade at like EOS Fitness or one of those commercial properties, you don't see the roof. You're looking straight over it. And yeah, we're here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Hold on, I do have a question for you. Looking at the street wall, I see you've used a waiver for articulation. And so we have a west-facing wall, the ground floor facing El Camino Real, all block or brick or stone with no windows at all. Can you describe how that waiver physically prevents you from achieving the project that you hope to have? I mean, if you were to add a window into that wall, would that physically alter the project as you would like to provide it?
No, so I think it was brought up a couple minutes ago that we're subject to the new objective design standards as opposed to the prior standards. If we were subjected to the prior standards specifically related to facade wall plane articulation, we would have met the requirements. The new standards are much more stringent. So like, for example, on the front of the project, we meet the new facade wall plane articulation requirements. On the north and south side, we do not, even though you'll see we have a significant amount of articulation on the north and south side. So a waiver would be required either way. Your point is well taken on the east-facing side.
No, I'm sorry. Maybe I miscommunicated. I'm thinking about the street side, which I would call the west elevation. I'm looking at the ground floor units where there's a lot of trees and landscaping shown, but there's no windows behind any of those trees or landscaping. I notice in your landscape plan, you actually only have one tree planted along that wall. So the rendering is, concealing the fact that that's a blank wall there. And I think it falls within the waiver that you've requested, but I guess I'm asking, what flexibility do you have to provide some sort of articulation along that wall that faces the first floor wall facing the street that's blank at the moment?
I'll defer that to our architect. It might have something to do with the interior design of those units specifically, but to respond to your comment about the landscaping, one of our waiver requests is I think for a 2-foot setback on the El Camino side. So there's not really a lot of room for landscaping in front of that portion of the building, but we do have a significant amount of landscaping elsewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the ground level units along El Camino Real, we wanted to face them north and south. The facade itself, yes, it is blank on that side, but the units, just like a double loaded corridor where you have units on either side, that's the situation. And we are open to adding articulation to that lower area with windows. It's just a noise consideration being so close to the road.
Okay. But there are bedrooms there and a bathroom. I mean, there's habitable space there that could have windows.
Correct, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions of the applicant?
Well, I noticed about the tree waiver, and yet I'm not sure why you need a tree waiver when you actually, when I looked at the scorecard, it looks like you actually are providing a lot of trees. So I'm confused about that.
Yeah, so it's a roughly 2-acre site, and I believe the city's requirement is 30 trees per acre, which would be 60 trees, and we fall slightly under that. And that's largely because we're trying to hit the unit requirement in the housing element, and then we're also adding additional affordable housing as allowed under state density bonus law. We also have a retaining wall on the east side of the property, so there's not a lot of room to meet the city's tree requirement, hence the waiver request.
How far below the requirement do you fall?
I forget, Esteban, do you? I could go
Yes,
pull it on
so
my computer.
the requirement is 30 trees per acre. The proposed is 17.7 trees per acre.
So the net of that is they're only putting up 60% of the trees per the code. I did that math.
Good.
Thanks.
I'll trust you. I didn't do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Google Docs did that. Google Notes did it.
Okay. Do we have any public speakers?
Yes, we have 3.
Okay. Can we call them?
And first up is Ruben Flores, followed by Dolores Welty, and then Miles, not sure the last name, V. Okay. Oh, Vince.
Thank you. Good evening. Good night, Planning Commissioners. My name is Ruben Flores. Lived in Encinitas for 24 years. I used to be a planning commissioner sitting there where you guys are, so I don't envy your job. Thank you for doing what you do. I think I actually supported this site, which is 2 blocks from my house, as one of the sites that should be developed. But I just learned about this development actually today. I wasn't even aware that it was coming before you. And I wish we and my neighbors, 30 of them with whom I have in a chat, would have had an opportunity to comment on this, because we're going to be severely affected when this development goes up. We are on the east side of El Camino. I looked at the 500-feet radius, and I can see that only Cambria, probably a few houses in Cambria, had to be notified. So just to give you my thoughts on this, I like to see a project that fits with the community, not only aesthetically, but also in harmony with our character. I love this project. I love the look of this project. It's beautiful. but it probably doesn't belong here along El Camino, taking into consideration what the aesthetics of the other surrounding areas, neighborhoods look like. So I was also wondering if you received any comments from the neighborhood around the site. I've heard that there were a couple of comments. Again, no one on my side of the street knew about this, and I can guess that it's because we were not within the 500 feet required zone, which is silly. I also thought that there were some serious environmental concerns with this site originally. I don't know where that's at, and I think that was one of the reasons why this site hadn't been developed in 20-something years, 24 years. And I just want to finish by saying that, our neighborhood really has issues with cars parked along Garden View at night, which is the first block behind where this community would be developed. I don't think there's sufficient parking to allow for guests, visitors to come to this proposed development as is. And I was wondering if a traffic flow analysis has been done to understand how this is going to be impacting El Camino flow, particularly making U-turns along El Camino to get onto the site and going shopping and so on and so forth. So I don't know if that was part of the study because I didn't have a chance to read the materials, honestly. So I really love the aesthetics, clashes. I think 87 units I never thought that 87 units could be developed at this site, honestly. I thought we'll see 40, 50 maybe, but this is insane for 87 units. I would just request that you consider some architectural modifications to make it more compatible with the surrounding, Spanish-style architecture of the community. And I think we're missing an opportunity to have a more open park area there. It looks like a compound, right? Very prohibitive. I mean, it is beautiful, but it's a compound. So those are my concerns. Thank you for listening. I hope you continue this for the future for another discussion to let the community comment. Thank you.
Next is Dolores Welty.
Dolores Welty, 2076 Sheridan Road, Leucadia. There aren't enough trees and they're too short. And I just wanted you to know that we are putting up too many rentals. And who is benefiting? I went down to the rental on the old Jesus Saves property. That's kind of a pretty place. And I thought, well, maybe I'll just move in there. Be a single story with an elevator. So I asked how much the rental was. Have you been down there to see how much they're getting? You should do that. You want a 2-bedroom? It's $4,700 a month plus. And then if you have a car, it's $200 more to park your car. Well, I don't need a 2-bedroom. I'll take a 1-bedroom. Oh, that's $4,500 a month with $200 for parking. I'm sure there are plenty of people in the world who don't mind spending that much money for an apartment, but I'm not one of them. How much will these be? Who do you expect to live in them? Anybody?
Next up is Miles Vince, followed by Ron Dodge.
Council staff, nice to meet you all. I actually just moved here from this little country called Canada. And I just moved to Encinitas, and my wife and I, a young family, just bought a home. It took us 18 months to find a house. And now I'm telling you what I'm paying. I'm paying way more than $4,100 a month. I really wish more projects like this were available in your community. We have problems employing people in new small businesses. We kind of sit and look at ourselves and go, okay, is this somewhere that we can grow? And I actually believe that this will help issues, as the previous speaker had spoke about. And I really hope that we see more projects like this.
Okay, last speaker is Ron Dodge.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I did actually hear about the meeting. I had put myself on notice when I found out that I missed the CPP. Anyway, I like the design as well. It's fresh. It does have a modern flair to it, and the point is made about maybe blending with the more traditional Southwest theme of the area, but we'll see where that goes. And I did serve on the El Camino Real Specific Plan Task Force, and in the summing up of that process and the plan, one of the council members actually mentioned putting in more mature trees along El Camino Real, and heading toward that kind of a theme for the roadway, and maybe this is a good place to start. The other comment I'll make is that the developer in this case is someone who's been very sensitive to the community, and Mr. Grover was involved with the Fox Point neighborhood, and I was impressed with how far he went with trying to accommodate neighbors and residents' commentary and requests for that particular development. And I suspect we'll have similar kinds of interaction with comments coming back from our community. I'm one of the folks that lives more than 500 feet away, but just having to find out. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes the speakers.
Okay. Would the applicant like to respond to any of the comments they've heard? Fair enough. All right. With that, I'll close the public comment portion and open it up to commissioner deliberation.
Question for staff. Oh, I'm sorry.
You're recognized by the chair.
Okay, thank you. Does the newly passed El Camino specific plan, any conditions in that affect this project, or are they two separate things?
So this project was deemed submitted through SB 330 before the El Camino Real specific plan came through. So,
let's see. In the biology report, gotta love the biology report. There's two mature Torrey Pines trees. And I believe there is another sensitive tree called the southwestern spiny rush. How does the staff and the applicant respond to, is there a mitigation for those, or is there a 1-for-1? I think the code is 3-to-1. Okay, so what's going to happen with those Torrey Pines trees? Do they fall under the mature tree ordinance? And I guess more importantly, is the mature tree ordinance even applicable in a by right project?
I'd like to defer that question to the project biologist to explain where the Torrey Pines lie in protection of it.
And they are subject to the 1-to-1, however, they're able to waive that through density bonus.
Okay.
Brian Grover here again, and our biologist can come up to speak about the spiny rush, because I don't know the answer to that. But related to your question about the Torrey Pines, those two Torrey Pines, there's two of them, and they're on the eastern portion of the property on the slope. They're not considered sensitive species under the city's plan because they're not naturally occurring. They were planted on that slope in the mid-90s as part of the overall grading for that commercial area to the east. And if they're not naturally occurring, they're not considered sensitive, and therefore no mitigation is required.
Is there any proof that someone planted them? How can you make that statement? How come it could have been a bird drop? How do you know that those trees were planted versus naturally occurring?
That was based on a determination by our biologist based on the age. You can determine the age of the tree with an arborist pretty easily, and those were determined to be planted in the mid-90s, right when that property was graded.
So aerial photos must show a mature tree showing up there, or a tree, not a sprig?
The aerial photos show a small tree that was placed on that slope, as you would see in any new development around 1995, 96.
Right.
Yeah. And then on the spiny rush.
Spiny, yeah, the southwestern spiny rush.
Hi, Stacy Nigro with Helix Environmental.
Could you speak into the microphone?
Sorry. Yes, sorry. Yes, ma'am. Stacy Nigro with Helix Environmental Planning. So the southwestern spiny rush is it's not a tree, it's like a herbaceous, smaller herbaceous plant. And there is some of that on the site. It is considered like a low-level rare plant. The California Native Plant Society, their rare plant rankings, they call it a CRPR, the California Rare Plant Ranking 4, which is the lowest level. And usually, like, that level of plant is not usually even considered under CEQA. Like, I know this project didn't have CEQA, but it's, as that level, it's not considered special status enough usually to mitigate at any kind of ratio, unless it's a significant population that if you were to take it out, it was gonna, cause a regional loss, which on a site this size, you simply don't have. So there's not species-specific mitigation for it, no.
So there's not enough of it.
There's not enough of it, and it's not rare enough to like mitigate at a species-specific level.
Does your report, your report talks about your report doesn't say it's not rare enough, does it? Or is that where you give the code, the 2BR or whatever the different code was that I'm supposed to?
Yeah, the CRPR code.
And is there an interpretation of that in the document? Or do I have to go look it up?
I don't understand
Your
the question.
comment being it's a sensitive plant, but it's not sensitive enough.
Right, like plants that are a CRPR 4 ranking are not mitigated at a species-specific level. It's not like a species that is on like the endangered species list or listed under the Endangered Species Act, which you would mitigate for at a species-specific level. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Brent?
It's certainly a large project. It's certainly a little different than a lot of the ones that we've seen. It will impact the area. I'm concerned about the traffic flow. I think somebody mentioned that, people doing U-turns and that type of thing through the area, which slows a lot of the traffic down. I was wondering about the parking myself, whether or not there was enough and where the overflow may go. But they certainly are meeting all the numbers for providing the parking and, supporting the size of development. It has a fairly attractive look to it. I think it is a little bit different, but I don't think it's completely out of character for the area. It's just my initial thoughts.
Okay. Susan?
I have a question for staff regarding the open parking area. Don't we require trees, like one for every 5 spaces? I didn't see them.
That is correct. It is one of the waiver requests.
I'm not inclined to grant that waiver. I don't see it as having an impact on costs. And it definitely has an impact on the albedo as far as too much solar on the parking, and that's why we have trees in our ordinance. But I don't see it as a huge cost thing. I don't understand why they would request it.
I think the question is, does it physically preclude them from building the project? So I don't think it's a financial issue. As a waiver, it needs to be a physical restriction.
I don't see it as physically precluding the project. to add trees at the parking.
If I can have staff clarify, I thought that that was to make sure that the fire road width was met, but I'd like staff to confirm.
Well, partially. So what happens too is the requirement would preclude some of the parking to be included, and it would push the wall over further into the slope. So it is a spacing issue more than a cost issue.
Well, then in that case, it has no impact on their ability to create the project if they don't have that waiver. And I am definitely inclined to deny that particular waiver about the trees and the parking.
I too have a little heartburn. I mean, after doing Fox Point Farms, to come back and just do the minimum requirement on the native at 50% when, you know, the intent is to try to do better than that. And we'd like to see better than rather than just doing average. So that's kind of a bummer. As it relates to the trees, I keep going back to it. There's a reason we have a tree ordinance in the city, and that's for public health. You know, we're in an urban zone. We have no tree canopy in here, and we're asking to just abide by the city code. And you're asking for a waiver, and those trees provide, you know, the point about a heat sink. We're looking at we're losing dirt to put up concrete, and yet we're putting less vegetation as possible. And I just kind of find that incongruent that we're taking away dirt, which needs to be developed, not a problem there, but we're doing everything we can to ask for waivers and design projects that lack greenery. I just think that, you know, that is a public health. I can go on and on about quality of life, but having green space and having places for people to enjoy space, and yet here we are asking for waivers to put less landscaping in. Just kind of find that kind of disheartening.
I have another comment about the trees. In general, that area with blank wall at the front could be improved inexpensively with trees and benches that would provide a place for someone to rest for a moment, or if they're, for example, coming home with something heavy, maybe they sit on the bench for a moment and then they continue on into the building. But I think when we look at development, I appreciate it on El Camino Real. I think that's the right place for density. It's a arterial street. It can handle the traffic. However, for developers who are adding density on that street, you can do it in a way that enhances rather than just maximizing every square foot for profit. You can still make a nice profit, and probably an even better profit if it's enhanced with a little bit of the gathering area, a little bit of a bench here, a tree there. You can see the pollinators attracted to those native plants. I think you actually increase your profit because people are attracted to that and find it a more of a reason to be interested in that property. So I would encourage that we look at that area in the front with those bare walls and think about what could we do to make that a little bit softer, a little bit better.
I think we have to be careful in my mind about the trees. And I like trees too. We're asking for a density in an urban-like environment, El Camino Real, right? So I think I would treat a suburban development differently. There's an expectation of a certain amount of greenscape and coverage, but this is a project facing, a major boulevard within our city. It's intended to become more of a street wall. Sir, please don't interrupt. All right. So El Camino Real is intended to be this pedestrian area with a street wall and a more urban-like environment interface with the city or with the street. You know, it would be tough to replace, you know, every tree, you know, on this site when based on its coverage. And I don't think we're going to meet our densities if everything has to be a cottage or you know, a small footprint that leaves a whole lot of extra space. I see a nice amenity deck with a pool and seating areas and different workout rooms, and I do think they're providing a good amount of amenity. The space out in front, I can see it's all in the public right of way, right? All those trees are street trees, not on site. So I just want to put my spin on that. Not that it's a done deal, but I do think a project like this merits a slightly different view than other projects that we've seen in the past, where trees have been a much bigger.
And Chair Dalton, if I may, just a reminder that this is a density bonus project. So you have to approve the project unless you can make certain findings. And here the question is, they're requesting a waiver. And the only way that you can deny a waiver is if you can make certain findings. And one of the required findings is that there's a specific adverse impact, and that's defined as a significant, quantifiable, direct, and unavoidable impact based on objective, identified, written public health or safety standards, policies, or conditions as they existed on the date the application was deemed complete. So we need to be able to say that they're violating a public health or safety standard, and that existed at the time when the application was complete.
Okay, I can speak to that. First of all, the tree, when we're looking at covering a previously 100% vegetated site with hard cover, you're going to increase the water running off of the roof, the paving. So in that open parking lot, those trees' roots will help to absorb the water, but also they will help to reduce the pollutants that would run off, because trees do that, the roots do that. At the same time, adding all of this traffic, the number of daily trips that would be generated by 87 dwellings with however many inhabitants, all of them driving, will generate a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, trees sequester carbon, and they filter that out of the air. Now, in an urban environment, a lot of the things that come from cars are carcinogenic. So definitely, trees help. And when you're telling me that you're only going to provide 60% of what we normally would ask for, I look at it as a pretty significant difference in the quality of life, the health, and the safety of my community. So I can't support that waiver. That particular waiver, to me, does not preclude the project. And maybe you need to think about even potentially a green roof, maybe with trees up higher. I'm not sure where you might add more trees, but certainly in that parking area and street trees, those are good areas.
I think if we're going to deny a waiver, we need to be very specific about the adverse impact and the quantifiable regulation that it's, you know, that we're worried about. I don't know that quality of life or lifestyle rises to that that standard in my mind. What I might suggest that we do is we circle the trees items. I hear other people having some concern if we could go through the remaining elements, and if we have to make a specific I don't think you can lightly deny the waiver. You're going to have to be very specific. And so I think we would want to come back to that with that.
Well, I think we would be able to quantify, because when you look at a tree, there's all kinds of data for how much it, carbon it sequesters, how many gallons of water annually are filtered, and there's quantifiable data.
Okay. We will consult the attorney, because I think if you're not ready to present that data here, I mean, it's a tough one, right? You've got to come armed with that information.
Or we can ask the developer to be a bit more reasonable as it relates to the city code. I mean, we can either come armed or we can suggest. And they can either accept or reject our suggestion. They've designed a project that is a concrete block. Yes, with some wood textures to it and a white roof. And it's great that the amenities are on site for the people that are there. That's great. But it also sits in an urban corridor. And if you look at 2nd Street, well, the city has a mature canopy tree on 2nd Street. I don't like ficus trees. They should be ripped out because they rip the sidewalks up. But we've made great pains as a city. And here's an opportunity on El Camino Real to change the dynamic of El Camino Real. And all we're doing is accepting a lot line to lot line because he can. And I'm saying, well, he can put trees in because he can. He's chosen not to, and he's chosen to ask the city and all the city residents and all the people that live in the city to accept his waiver because he wants to throw a couple more units up because he can, versus abiding by the code, which he's not. So that's an intent that I am bummed. Can't force him to do it. I can't force him to put 75% native plants in, although he probably should, because the minimum's 50. He's asking for waivers for height. He's asking for waivers for, I think there's 7 or 8 of them. Mm-hmm. And I just think that this one's, do I have a chapter and verse from the, Audubon Society or the Arbor Society that tells me how valuable a tree and how much water a sycamore absorbs? No, I don't. And maybe next time I should. If that's what we're going to do to deny it, we're going to be required to, by code, to deny a waiver. And so maybe I need to be better armed next time to do chapter and verse. But I just think in this particular case, we're setting a precedent and we're trying to change the look and feel of this corridor to be more friendly and more walkable. And all we're doing is putting up hard walls that people can walk by. And you brought the articulation up, and I think he and the designer seemed receptive to your suggestion, which is great. So I'm hoping he's more receptive to designing a project or incorporating a bit more vegetation.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that's the west exposure. And so it's going to get an awful lot of sun. It's actually the way that the compass direction is, I believe it's actually a little bit southwest.
Yeah, I'm just feeling trapped by the.
You mentioned traffic earlier.
Yes.
We're going to have to come back to trees, okay? And we will. But traffic has been put out there. I have a hard time thinking that this is a 3-lane road that can't support. I mean, it's been built for industrial and retail lots, all of the length of it down to, that these units will have any significant impact on that.
But it's also sharing a lot with businesses. And I was wondering how it's going to impact those businesses. They're going to have to make some definitely restrictions on parking.
Well, I think they're providing 108 parking spaces.
Yeah, and part of it is in a shared parking lot with a business. So, yeah.
There's a nice synergy there too, right?
Course.
I mean,
it's going to dwarf the size of that thing, though. But But you know, it is the character of the community right there.
I think it would be a really nice asset to that community. I think the architecture is a really great example of architecture, given with one asterisk of my blank wall comment earlier. But I do think it's a very nice project, and it steps back in significant ways from the street. That's difficult to do from a economics and design. So they've baked in some real quality to the building, I think. And several comments have mentioned it being a beautiful building.
Someone asked about the height up against the hillside behind it and structures. From the street side, you won't see those anymore. You will no longer see those buildings up there on that bluff.
Yeah. But is that a view we're trying to protect?
Not protect, but certainly consider, I think. I mean, that's why I think people asked how high is it compared to that bluff behind it? You won't see those Torrey Pines anymore from the street. Yeah. You will know, they'll be trapped between those two visually. You'll see them from the parking lot, the businesses on either side, but.
I think you have a very, very, very difficult to reject the height waiver.
Of course,
right?
yeah. No, I'm not suggesting that that's in some way leading towards a rejection at all. It's just an observation.
Yeah. Susan.
I just wanted to speak to the traffic that you brought up. So I saw that the area roadway segments are currently at an acceptable LOSC or better. So I think we're probably okay. I think in general, some of those intersections are noted to have operated at D, which is not a great grade as a former professor. But what I think is these are quite a few. I noticed of the units were smaller. So maybe some of the people will ride bikes more, hopefully. Hopefully maybe they'd be encouraged to get on a bicycle. And it is on a corridor where the bus does run, hopefully more frequently than it does now. But maybe with development on that corridor, like this development, we increase NCTD and other MTA, whatever, transit, seeing it as a more viable route. I do think, design-wise, I just want to make a comment. I agree with you. It's not an easy thing, and the step backs really help a lot. I would love to see a green roof. If you need to get some more trees in, a roof would be a fairly easy way to do it. But I think the parking area, as far as data, parking areas that are not shaded with trees generate heat. And we do have a climate action plan because of the anticipated climate crisis that we're already seeing results of in some areas of the world. And so the heat generation is another aspect of this building to think about.
The parking on the rear
generates heat.
The parking on the rear is underneath the building. So we're talking about trees along the sides, parking along the sides of the structure?
There's one stretch of surface parking on the back side that's not under the building.
Okay.
It'll be between a
So there's a retaining wall?
A retaining wall on
Yeah,
the
and
east
then
side
there's
and a
underneath
four-story
parking.
building
And
on the
there-
other side.
Is there additional parking behind there besides the under parking? I mean, the way I saw it was just there's under building parking and a retaining wall.
Yeah.
So where's the tree? Where the tree's going to go?
They have an area
there's a
of
shared parking lot
uncovered parking.
That's right.
In addition to the covered parking.
That's
So
right.
they do have some
Where the tree's gonna go, they're not
uncovered
putting them in.
parking.
They're not designing them in.
So I would hate to prioritize trees over people. If we need housing in this community, and we're going to start reducing the number of apartments so that we can fit more trees. Already, there they're falling short of our goal, which is to double the number of trees on that site. But they are exceeding the number of trees that are on that site now.
But I didn't
right?
see
By
them adding.
60%.
I didn't see them adding parking area that was going to create a heat spot. Has been mentioned.
Right.
I didn't quite see that. I mean, there's generally the roads going back behind the building and the parking on behind the building. So
Can you, can I look at just the map of the ingress and egress real quick?
Sure.
In terms of how they enter in. Can you bring the traffic, I don't know if it's traffic map or in the in and out? So there's no decel lanes. It's just like pulling into Armstrong's. It would just be, you just turn a 90-degree right-hand turn.
Yeah.
Just like Armstrong's is set up that way, and there's the medical office building just to the north of it. So there's no requirement. Is there no requirement to decel into a residential project on a busy street? I'm just asking because I don't know.
There's no requirement. You do have the bike lane area, which does provide kind of a deceleration area. You can see the conflict striping, so a car would enter into that conflict striping where the bike lane is and then make their right turn into the driveway.
And if you're headed southbound on El Camino Real, there's a median there, so there's no left turn into the project. Is that correct?
So the project is proposing modifying the median. You can kind of see it on this exhibit with that left turn arrow. So they will be constructing a left turn pocket to provide access into the northern driveway.
And you're good with that?
What it benefits?
You don't think a 3-lane road, I'm going to come across a 3-lane, I mean, we've done so much work down by Ralph's, Z sidewalks, and now we're having a car hang a left across 3 lanes, and staff's okay with that engineering planning?
So what it benefits is it prevents people from having to go to the intersection south at Garden View and El Camino Real and make that U-turn there.
Yeah, it's an annoying thing, but you also are we waiving anything to hang a left out of the north ingress and egress site? Are we giving him a waiver, or you think you think that that's a safe ingress and egress, turning left across 3 lanes with no stoplight on a road where we've spent a lot of money just putting in crosswalks rather than closing that off and make them hang a UE up the street at the light?
Staff finds the left turn pocket acceptable.
Okay. We've talked traffic, we've talked trees, we might come back to trees. Were there any other issues that you had with the project? No? Brent?
no.
Okay.
Let's not forget the facade in front.
Right. So, again, they're using a waiver for the facade. I mentioned that as a potential courtesy to say, listen, guys, maybe go look at this. I don't know that I would reject or deny the project. I couldn't overcome their waiver request over that concern over the facade. I would entertain a motion to approve it with a condition that they study it, like maybe we ask them, formally to do it, but I don't think I would reject a waiver.
I would appreciate that. I don't think I have the statistics to prove a tree cools. We can probably, to Susan's point, show you that a tree absorbs water. What a surprise. I think we could probably find that data fairly simply. But if you're sitting here telling me that I can't reject it because I don't have it, I would hope that the applicant would strongly consider, given his prior history in the city on multiple projects, that do a best case scenario to try a little harder, and whether that's to articulate the window, he doesn't have to do that either. So to me, I'm looking at the tree the same way you're looking at the window. Doesn't have to do it. You can give us the thumb and keep going.
Let's consult our attorney and see what he says. if we were to desire to deny a waiver, does the evidence, the preponderance of evidence has to be presented by us of why it should be, but is that like
So
here
it's
and now?
it's not a preponderance of the evidence standard. Rather, it's really, did it exist or not? At the time when the project was in existence, did we have a rule that says X, and they're violating that rule? And but that's true for any waiver, right?
Right.
There's always a rule that they're requesting to change. So the fact that they're requesting a waiver, that's not the rule, right? So there has to be something more than that. And let me get the exact language, but essentially we need to prove that it's an existing public health or safety standard that existed at the time that the application, so us generating a standard, that does not meet the qualification. We already have a rule that says you need to do X, and we have to point to that rule that existed at the time the application was complete.
And to just further clarify, that's specific in this case to not planting the full amount of trees equating to whatever that standard is.
That's my beef. He's asking for the waiver, and he's only planting 60% of the trees. But I have to point to denying that waiver. I have to have some more information, which
Just not that he's not complying with that rule, but that rule then, or that is affecting some other rule that we have in place.
Right, so we'd have to be able to point to some other rule that's being violated that says something like you can't,
So I would have to go to the climate action plan or something like that, or the development's not sequestering 8 tons of methane or
And-
some sort of statistic.
Right, exactly. And that's a specific adverse impact, which is a public health or safety standard. And does GHG, is that a public health or safety standard? All that.
Right, we did.
But it's very simple to pull up data of the health benefits of trees in urban environments.
But
It's been
Susan,
studied a lot.
It's not a matter of whether it's a good idea or not. It's a matter of, does the city have a rule that explicitly says that you have to sequester?
I don't think that's true.
Well, we just heard that
because
it is.
what it is, showing that it's a bad thing for health is as simple as providing the data. It doesn't have to be a city rule. That's not true.
We were just advised by our attorney that it is the rule.
Well, it doesn't have to be only a city rule, but if there's like a federal law that said X, Y, or Z, or there's a federal health or safety standard, we could point to those. But they're that rule had to apply already within the city. So essentially that's, but it could be state law or city laws or whatever applicable law might be.
And we consider anything that we can regarding state laws, local laws, when applicants are requesting waivers. So we were unable to find anything to deny the requested waivers. That's part of our process in looking at waivers. So we did consider our climate action plan, and there was nothing that says that if you don't do all of your trees, you would then be causing a health and safety risk. So those are considered in our reviews.
What I might suggest is we take not a timeout, but if we reopen and ask the applicant if this discussion has caused them to consider anything differently in their process or in their application.
All right. Thank you, Commissioners. Just want to address a couple of the points that have been made in this discussion. So first, just broadly speaking of the project and to some of your comments, Commissioner Prendergast, yes, I was the developer of Fox Point Farms. I'm the owner of the commercial space at Fox Point Farms. My team and I here are also the developers of Sunshine Gardens. We didn't just meet the tree requirement on both of those projects. We exceeded it at Fox Point Farms. I substantially exceeded it. And I planted several mature 80-gallon oak trees because I could. And there's a number of reasons why I could. That was a 21-acre site. We built to the minimum, not the maximum. We had the ability to, based on our land basis. I could go on and on about why I was capable of doing that. Sunshine Gardens, somewhat similar scenario. If staff could put up that landscape plan that I saw 5 minutes ago, And I'm not here to give you excuses. I'm just here to tell you that we spent a lot of time with our architect, our landscape architect, and our civil engineer designing what I think is a very beautiful building, and will do a lot to start a positive redevelopment of El Camino Real and introduce housing on that corridor, not just adjacent to it. But you can see we had a 1.93 acre site to work with, and it's not really possible to put 58 trees, which is the city's requirement on that site. We're putting 34 trees on that site. And here you can see we're putting a tree everywhere we can possibly put a tree. Where we don't have a tree is either our building or a mandated fire lane per the City of Encinitas Fire Department, or a retaining wall, which we put a bunch of trees up on the top of that. To address Commissioner Sherrod's comments, there are currently 19 trees and or bushes, most of which are small shrubs, and we're planting 34. So to Commissioner Dalton's point, net, we are increasing the number of trees on the site, not decreasing. So I just wanted to address a couple of those points related to trees. Commissioner Whitaker, you had a comment about parking. Just to clarify, the 108 parking spaces that we are providing are all on site. None of those are shared with either the credit union to the south or Armstrong Garden Center to the north. We are in discussions with Armstrong Garden Center about a shared parking agreement. I think Commissioner Prendergast mentioned, or maybe Commissioner Dalton, the beneficial uses of having a place that closes at 5:30 or 6 o'clock and a residential use adjacent that might need guest parking at night. And so that's something that we've been working on outside the requirements of this project with our neighbor to the north. But again, I just wanted to address, Chair Dalton, your comments about adding windows on the west-facing ground level units. I'm not sure why we didn't do that. It sounds like our architect and our team is amenable to looking into that. So I think we'd be fine with a condition that says we add windows there, not just look into it. I think we'll do that. But I'm just being very clear with you all on the trees. We're not doing it to save money. We're not only putting 34 trees and not 58 to save money. If you can find somewhere in the site plan where we could plant more trees, we'll plant them. It has nothing to do with saving money. We're building a complex hybrid podium structure, which is not cheap to build. We could have built something different that costs a lot less, but we wanted to set a good example on this corridor. I have a certain level of architectural integrity that I want in the projects that I work on, and we're achieving it here.
Okay, I appreciate you coming up to clarify those points. Bob,
I would like to add my input about the idea of adding windows for the sake of adding windows.
Okay.
I'm totally opposed to that idea. I think that on that side of the street, the energy consideration would negate any benefit aesthetically. I think that, having one side of my house is in that same orientation, and it's basically southwest sun beating on it. And so windows on that side are just going to be like little heaters when we have sunny days. So I think it's wrong to ask them to add windows. I mean, articulation, sure. A bench planter or, seating, something that break it up, okay. But windows don't make sense. And the noise from El Camino Real, windows just are a bad idea, in my opinion.
I think you can mitigate the sunshade, and if you want heat, then maybe you don't have to run your heater inside if you on a sunny winter day.
To be snarky, if you have a tree there, then it's nice and cool and shady.
Well,
But there and the vegetation is a sound dampener. So I mean, there's people that make really good windows, and I'm sure you can come up with something that's both. I think the idea of the window is a great idea. I'm sure it can be 2 inches thick, and it's going to cost a lot of money, but it'll be a sound dampener, and they exist. Maybe not Geldwin, but I'm sure they're out there that will take the heat load and still provide.
Also a privacy, though, for the people who are inside. I personally wouldn't want a window right on El Camino Real.
I would leave it to the architect to address those and Bob, one thing comes to my mind. We've used this with the public when we talk about the number of apartment or units in a project, and they always get bigger and bigger and bigger. We've got a project here that came with a really high quality design to start with. Admittedly, maybe it fell short of what we hoped on the tree count, okay? But in my mind, it's a very attractive building, and it's the stepping back from the street. I'll say most developers won't do that, and we have plenty of examples of other projects in this city that don't do that. So I'd hate to put them through the thumb screws only to find out that they shift all of that back up and say, well, we're going to cheapen the building to pay for these, to fit these trees or whatever. So I appreciate that we can make our opinions known about that to them. I do think that they have established a certain reputation within our community for the types of projects that they bring forward and have built. I would support this project, and I would support an amendment or a condition that says that they look at that front wall for articulation and that they consider opportunities to add trees if they present themselves.
Sounds great.
Okay, so.
I agree.
Okay, so I'll make that a formal motion, and if I can get a second.
I'd like to second that.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Could we call a vote, please? I'm not seeing the results, but there it is, 4-0. The motion passes, and the project is approved. Thank you, everyone. Okay, we have other business to continue with, so I'll let you guys filter out if you would, or stay and participate. Our next item is item 9, future agenda items added by planning commissioners. Are there any future agenda items to be added by planning commissioners? Okay, seeing none. Item 10, planning commission reports. We have scheduled to discuss the work plan, and I see your name, Susan.
I've been kind
next
of pushing that we do this work plan. Well, the point is, as planning commissioners, we represent our community, right?
Yes.
And we are to advise on these items in the work plan, but we can't just come off the top of our head. We need findings. And so we have to divide up the work, basically, of researching these various items in our work plan. And then our chair will solicit our report at meetings, right? And then eventually, those reports go into an annual report, and it advises our council. So it's not that we have authority, but we do have a responsibility, I feel, to our community to take it up. So I would like to suggest that we get started. And I myself am very interested in the affordable housing topic as our biggest need in our community. I started a Facebook page called Affordable Housing in 2019 when I first started in this role as planning commissioner, and I've steadily added information to it. So I would like to work on that with one other commissioner. I'm not sure if we have another. Oh, you're interested, Bob? Yay. So I have a helper. And maybe, I don't know if people want to look through their work plan and.
Okay, so just to be clear, a subcommittee is a maximum of 2, right? We can't commit a quorum outside of this hearing. Okay, so 2 people is the most that will work on a subject. And I appreciate that that's an interest of yours and that you want to take that on. I have maybe a slightly different take on it. I mean, the Planning Commission does advise the council. It also acts as this adjudicative, quasi-judicial board, and it does take a lot of work to prepare and read these staff reports and attend here on a Thursday night, until 10 o'clock and all that. So I don't personally see that we will divide up the entire work plan and all be off working on every element of that work plan, okay? To me, the work plan established some things that were priorities and some things that were lower priorities, but it does take, in my mind, a personal interest and commitment to doing it that I will say, I don't want to go through just, if someone expresses a desire to do something, great, I would support that. I did review the work plan with Anna earlier today. The majority, if not all of them, on the council-directed ones in that first category, which I forget the name of the heading, current goals, they're all in progress with city staff except for the affordable housing one, I think. And even that had some movement. But
And there's an affordable housing task force that's ongoing. I think that
right.
It's like 8 or 9 people on, including the mayor.
Right. So I think
I think that some of the topics would mean that maybe we would attend some of our other commission meetings. Like, for example, if we're interested in attending the Affordable Housing Commission, we could do that. We would still not be a quorum, just be the two of us going and attending and reporting out on what they're doing, that kind of thing.
Okay.
We don't, and that's something that I've noticed in our city. There's a real disconnect between all these different commissions that are all working so avidly on something, and then we don't really know until suddenly there's something published in the paper, or we find out some way. Maybe Anna reports out to us, but I think it would be great if we could be a little bit more communicating between each other with these different commissions. And even, I don't know if other commissioners are watching city council meetings or not watching, looking at their agenda and minutes or not looking. But anyway, if there's more communication and we know what each other are working on, it would help. I think it could only strengthen our ability to do a good job.
Okay. There was some suggestion earlier in the work plan about attending all these meetings, and I don't think there was a general support for that. I don't think it went into the work plan to do that. It's a lot to do, and I think it starts to insert the Planning Commission in areas that it isn't necessary. The City Council is ultimately the body that is responsible for all of that together, and so I'm hesitant.
There are a lot of ways to research. You can look at a report online pretty easily. It doesn't have to be going to a meeting in person.
Yeah.
But it would be up to us to decide how are we going to research this topic
Is there a concern?
and bring something back.
Okay. I think the key element here is that you're going to do it, meaning the staff time and budgets are set by the city manager and directed down. So I don't think, and this is your purview and our purview to say, okay, I will spend my time and think about this topic and come back and give a report to the group, and then the group can take an action or, decide, hey, thank you for that, but we're not going to do it, or great report, we'll pass it on to the city council.
It could be case by case.
Yes.
For example, something that comes up and we decide, you decide, that you're very interested in that and you want to research and bring back, that would be, I'm very interested in the affordable housing.
Sure.
And so I volunteer to do it.
Well, I heard Bob volunteer also to be that, and as a chair, I'll create a subcommittee that is the two of you to research affordable housing topics and bring it back to the group when you're ready, and we can discuss what you found in your research.
And if you need a template for a report, I can give you a template so that you can
That'd be
work
great.
off of that.
It'd be awesome. Okay. Chair, I don't know how that fits in the agenda, but I did want to address something that I spoke to on October 3rd. Is this the right time to bring up a reference to a dialogue that I had with the gentleman from the fire department?
That's fine. Are we done talking about the work plan?
I'm sorry.
I think we'll close, I think we're done with the work plan, so we can
Sure.
say close item, or that part of item 10, and we continue on with another commission.
Yeah,
report.
right, then commissioner comments, right?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, well, is it okay now?
Go.
All right. I'd like to take this opportunity to clarify some of the comments made during the October 3rd Planning Commission meeting regarding historical fires in Encinitas. I spoke about 3 houses that burned down during the Harmony Grove fire. There were actually 4, 3574 Lone Jack, 3488 Fortuna Ranch Road, 3312 Dove Hollow, and there was another one on Dove Hollow. I don't have the address. I wrote the wrong address down. Also, the city's website, specifically the encinitas.gov/government/department/public safety /emergency preparedness /identifiable hazards, also specifically stated the Harmony Grove fire and 3 houses that had burned down. I also misspoke and used the reference to the Harmony Grove fire in 2003, but it was actually 1996 when that fire occurred. Also, the October newsletter from the Liebenheim Fire Safety Council actually has a detailed eyewitness account of the Harmony Grove fire from Annie Mallison. My concern in clarifying these was the FPP report submitted on behalf of the sanctuary was incorrect, and I tried to call that out. At the time, I didn't have my facts, and after speaking with people that were in town at the time and speaking with people in the fire department, I just wanted to clarify those statements. So, thank you.
All right. Thanks for following up with that. Is there any other response?
No, we just confirmed it didn't change the conclusions of that report.
Okay. Good. With that, I'm going to move on to secretary reports.
Yes. I think I mentioned last time that there was an appeal received for the La Costa 48, and I had my list up. Apologize. So we have the La Costa 48 appeal going on October 23rd. And then we have Torrey Crest was appealed and is going on November 13th. As well, on November 13th, actually this decision wasn't before the Planning Commission, so I'll skip over that one. And we have a tentative date for the Quail Meadows Housing Element project site that was appealed on November 20th. And that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you very much. With that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting until the next regular Planning Commission meeting of November 7th, and we are complete.